It's 6 o'clock on Saturday, the 11th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
We're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. And here's what we're going to be discussing this morning.
Well, Prince Charles has privately criticised the government's plan to deport migrants to Rwanda, calling it appalling. It comes as the High Court ruled that the first batch of migrants could be deported sometime next week.
Boris Johnson has ordered ministers to do everything in their power to ensure the release of the two British men sentenced to death in the separatist region of Donetsk. What will this mean for the war in Ukraine and for Britain's further involvement?
And what's the best way for couples to sleep? Alone or together? What do you think? We're going to be hearing from a sleep expert on why separate beds may not be the answer.
As ever, you can join in any of our discussions or send us your messages by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews.
And of course, if you want to watch us on YouTube, please do, but don't forget to subscribe. It's absolutely free and it means that you'll get all the very latest on the big stories that we're talking about today. So our main news today, and as the UK prepares to send its first batch of migrants to Rwanda, the Prince of Wales has reportedly privately criticised the government's plan.
Yeah, he may have meant it as a private remark, but it's all over the newspapers this morning. He's been quoted as saying he thinks the approach is appalling, although his office has reiterated he remains politically neutral, though they haven't denied that he said it.
The claim comes as campaign groups say they will keep fighting after they lost a High Court bid to stop the government from flying migrants to Rwanda, whilst an appeal against the ruling has now been launched.
Well, to tell us more about all this, we're joined by political reporter Bill Bowkett. Good morning, Bill.
Very good morning.
Hi. It's astonishing. As I said, Prince Charles may have meant those, and they were indeed private comments to people that he was talking to privately, all over the front pages this morning. I wonder what Priti Patel is going to think of that.
She's probably not going to be too pleased, if I'm honest. I mean, it's not, it's not uncommon for royals to have, political views.
It's certainly not uncommon for him to.
Exactly. He's a key advocate of environment, and I think you remember, I think he was accused of trying to lobby for more grammar schools when Tony Blair was Prime Minister as well. So this is not uncommon. The problem is that it comes from, our future king, our future head of state, who is supposed to be politically neutral. He's supposed to be, beyond politics. And only his role, at least in our constitutional democracy, is to ascend law and have, weekly minutes with the Prime Minister. So really, having these comments on the front page, given the ruling that we had yesterday in the High Court, is not going to go down well at all in the Home Office. In
terms of that ruling yesterday, the plane should be heading out on Tuesday, as we understand it. This group has said they're going to appeal the decision. How do you appeal it if they've already flown out?
So the ruling that was done in the Royal Courts of Justice yesterday said that the scheme itself doesn't break law, and it should be down to the individual cases because, asylum seekers, deportations are wide varied. Some might be families, some themselves might be people smugglers, might be involved in organised crime. So what's going to happen now is that these campaign groups are probably going to now fight once again an appeal, but on an individual level to hope that these people won't be sent to Rwanda next week.
Well, we're told, aren't we, that it's going to be on Tuesday, the flight to Rwanda, and at the moment there's nothing to stop it going ahead, unless they can do an appeal awfully quickly. And appeals don't happen that
And actually, a lot of the time, with cases like these, activists can get involved as well, when they will actually blockade the airports themselves from stopping these migrants.
Well, a lot of people might laugh and say, well, they won't, the airports are in such chaos anyway, they'll be lucky to get a plane on the ground.
Exactly.
But, as Stephen said, surely we could be facing an appalling situation where we've flown them out there only to have to bring them back if the appeal is successful.
I know. It's not going to be great. And the thing is, this is just the initial trial. This is the £120 million trial that Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, had outlined months before. And hopefully this will spawn a wider partnership with the Rwandan government to send asylum seekers trying to get into Britain, into the Central African countries. So if we're already having obstacles before that first flight is even left, I can't imagine what's going to happen if it is expanded further.
But this is a win-win for the Prime Minister and the government, isn't it? In the sense that he knows this is a policy that the vast majority, or certainly a majority of people in the UK are behind.
And especially Tory voters as well. Tory voters and also Brexiteers as well, people in those red wall seats, very socially conservative, wanting the issue of immigration to be settled. And while, it's not nice for a system for this to be in place, it is necessary given the influx of immigration that's been happening in this country over the last several decades, the consistent promises by, conservative governments, conservative prime ministers, David Cameron, Theresa May, to cut back on immigration. So if this is the step that is needed to solve this problem, to stop illegal people smuggling and to solve the wider issue of illegal immigration in this country, then so be it.
Interesting as well. I mean, Boris Johnson's got so many subjects on his plate at the moment, hasn't he? But the latest being, of course, the plight of the two British-born Ukrainian soldiers who are now under the threat of a death penalty. And Boris Johnson is urging his ministers to do everything they can to solve that problem. How can they? I mean, what on earth can they do?
Well, the thing is that the president has now been set with Nazim Zaghari-Ratcliffe in that this worrying precedent where now nation states are able to basically hold prisoners of war, as they're known. The Russian government claim they're mercenaries, these two individuals. They're not. They're prisoners of war. They've been fighting alongside Ukraine and allegedly have been living there for several years. Yeah. And one of them actually has a Ukrainian wife as well. But now the question is going to be raised as to what the solution can be. Clearly, diplomacy is not the answer.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, in terms of, say, you compare it to what happened with Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, but, I mean, clearly we don't like Iran as a nation state, but they are nevertheless a nation state. This is dealing with, it might in effect be Moscow, but it is the People's Republic of Donetsk.
Yes, exactly.
So which doesn't have any legitimacy anyway.
Yes, it is the separatist nation, and obviously the Russian government claiming it's an independent nation state as well. Backed by Russian forces as well. So that is really going to be the sticking point. And I know that Ben Wallace has been involved in this issue a lot, and I know Liz Truss has been travelling to Europe to speak to fellow foreign ministers and leaders and policymakers in neighbouring countries as to what the solution could be.
It's huge. It's
hugely Prime Minister at the moment. I know
multiple
so
fronts.
Many people want to be Prime Minister at the moment. It absolutely boggles the mind, doesn't it?
Entire life.
Yeah.
Sole ambition.
On that front, actually, while we've got you, do you think things are where it's very busy for the Prime Minister in terms of the political, personal jeopardy that he's in? Is that dying down a little bit now? Is he getting on with it?
So he survived the no confidence vote, which was the best opportunity that Tory MPs actually had to get rid of him as leader.
And Graham Brady's made it clear he doesn't want to introduce
and he doesn't want to. I mean, I've seen in the front page at the Eye this morning about how maybe there might be an annual general meeting of local chairs of Tory associations to maybe get rid of them. But we know that Boris is going to be in office for a long time. Yes, there are going to be different challenges across the way politically. You've got these two really vital by-elections, which they're predicted to lose. You've still got the Privileges Committee investigation, and there still is the possibility of a snap general election. But for the meantime, once again, as Boris does Teflon himself, he survives for another day.
Meanwhile, they're sort of having a little go at each other over on the Labour Party side, because Angela Rayner has been a little bit outspoken about Keir Starmer's lacklustre approach to Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday. She said that his training as a lawyer means that he doesn't come over with the emotion that's needed.
No, and I remember watching that Prime Minister's questions, and it just completely killed the mood by having to then focus on Nadine Dorris's tweet. About the state of the health service, and inadvertently saying how the Tory party was ill prepared for the pandemic in response to Jeremy Hunt. But yeah, I mean, his strategies of PMQs has been berated, multiple times. But PMQs, it's theatrical. It doesn't necessarily.
Well, I tuned
represent
in
how
to
they
see
should feel
fireworks,
as
and
well.
there were no fireworks.
No, and he should have at that moment. And the thing you've also got to consider is that actually the talent that is starting to emerge on that Labour front bench who could really be a successor to Keir Starmer. Wes Streeting was very impressive on Question Time the other day. Lisa Nandy in response to the housing announcement done by Boris Johnson, the Right to Buy scheme. Angela Rayner, of course, has made her intentions clear that she wants to run for
Well,
leader.
except there could be this, if either of them are charged with or given a fixed penalty notice
stand
for
down.
this, which could happen, still could happen, then they're both out, aren't they?
Yeah, they have. And it's a solid promise. And Keir Starmer has also stated that he wouldn't rerun for the leadership if that were to happen. But we're still waiting to see.
We are.
On that Durham Constabulary probe.
Yeah, we shall see. Bill, thank you very much indeed. I know we're going to see you next hour as well, so we'll see you then.
Yeah, a lot going on. Should we bring you up to date with what's going on today? A man has been arrested in Kent on suspicion of murder after a teenage boy was stabbed to death at his home in Manchester. The 15-year-old's mother was also injured in the attack in Miles Platting on Thursday night. Greater Manchester Police, who called the incident ferocious, said the 44-year-old suspect is believed to be known to the victims.
From September, student loan interest rates are going to be capped at 7.3% for a year to protect against soaring inflation. Borrowers would have faced a 12% rise, or at least a lifting to 12% by the end of the summer. But the Department for Education stepped in, calling it the largest scale reduction of student loan interest rates on record.
1 in 6 workers say they wouldn't be able to last a month financially if they lost their main source of income. The Building Societies Association say 1 in 4 people believe money worries affect their ability to do their job. It said people won't be able to save money in the coming months amid the cost of living squeeze.
The mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help hard-pressed families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Coldwell said dozens have had to pay privately to get a prescription at a time when the cost of living, as we know, is soaring. She said those 18 or over can access treatment, but younger children are being left behind.
Well, as the nation prepares to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the liberation of the Falklands next week, GBNews has been given access to previously unseen images of the conflict.
Yeah, the pictures taken at the time by a young Falklands photojournalist have gone on display at a special exhibition in the historic Chatham Dockyard.
You can see an extended feature on these powerful images on GBNews digital platforms now. Here's a little peek.
The surrender in full swing here. I mean, you can see all the detritus around the streets as well.
These Argentines are being rounded up by British troops. You can see, I think, Paras or Marines doing their best to round them up and at the same time getting these men to clear up a little bit. But the mess was unspeakable. This was one of our general stores here, which had been torched and was gone, but the smoke was still lingering. And when I look at these, I can almost still smell them. It was just a complete scene out of hell.
That takes you back, doesn't it?
I had a letter the other day. I think I picked it up on Thursday from a viewer. And forgive me, I can't remember your name, but was wanting us to do coverage on the Falklands anniversary, and quite rightly, but also wanting me to go out to a grave in Kent, where there is a Stephen Dixon with the same spelling, exactly the same, who died in the Falklands at the age of 18.
Oh my goodness! So they must have repatriated his body.
And wanted it, and now. And do you know what? We've looked into doing it. What we can't do is track down remaining members of the family to get permission to actually go and film at the graveside and things.
There
so
must
we can't
be
do
a
it.
family who
Yeah,
know him.
we've not been able to.
Because obviously, as I said, they went to the extent of repatriating his body.
Unless they've passed on or something now, which
All of
they
them?
may have done. Well, he would have been.
know.
He would have been 58, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Now. But yes.
He was 18, and there were a
18.
lot of... I mean, there would be now, if there were that sort of conflict now, a lot of very young soldiers, sailors, airmen.
No, when it's someone with your name,
Yeah.
it
Gosh.
sort of just strikes a chord, doesn't it?
Last Monday, I was telling you that last Monday was the 39th anniversary of my first day on breakfast television on TVAM. And of course, if the Falklands happened the year before that, I remember exactly what I was doing as well. I was a regional reporter in the Midlands in Birmingham for ATV, which became Central. And then during the Falklands War, ITN, the Independent Television News Service, sent all their reporters to the Falklands. And so to actually cover home news, they brought in people from the regions. And so I was working out of ITN in London, doing some amazing home stories.
Right.
And then watched the homecoming of all of the people coming back from the Falklands. Amazing. RAF Bryce Norton, for instance, aircraft full of servicemen were coming back from the Falklands, and their families were at one end of the runway, and they had landed at the other end of the runway, and they came out, and we had so many amazing photographs of little girls, little boys running towards their daddies. It was just incredible time, absolutely amazing time. 40 years ago. Wow.
Remarkable.
What were you doing at school or something?
Well, I'd be eight.
Yeah.
I was 8.
Primary school.
Primary school.
Did you?
Yeah, but I remember it happening. I remember I remember some of the coverage on news as it was back then.
Yeah.
We had to put it on at a specific time.
That's right, because it was frightening. Very frightening.
Awful. Anyway, look, just a reminder that we will have live coverage throughout a special day of Falklands commemorations coming up on Tuesday.
Yeah, and if you've got any memories about what you were doing at the time, or indeed any family members who were involved in the conflict, love to hear your views and your reflections on what it's like 40 years ago, can you believe?
Got to say good morning to Amanda today, who's been in touch very, very early on. Morning to you, Amanda. She says, it's really good to watch you both every week. You're warm, fair and entertaining, and I am not easily pleased.
Ooh!
So there you go, Amanda. If you have a moment, please say hello to my darling mother, who is 89 and has COVID. Norma, good morning to you. She's recovering after chemo as well. Oh, you've really had the works, haven't you? She's so brave. So she's called Norma, but to the family she's known as Noodle.
Well, happy birthday, Noodle, and I hope you recover very quickly.
She loves your show as well. Thanks for brightening up the weekend.
Yeah. One other thing I want to talk about today, because we were mentioning it very briefly at the end of the programme yesterday, but it's on the front pages today, is the disaster that was... Well, it wasn't a disaster, but it was a near disaster. That was Britney Spears' wedding. She got married to her long-term boyfriend, and it was an enormous wedding. I mean, talk about an Instagram occasion. It was... have you seen the pictures?
Is it?
She had her home done out like Cinderella's castle.
She was saying it was going to be intimate.
It was huge, and there were so many. I mean, everybody was there. All of these A-listers were there. She had an absolute fairy tale dress.
Versace, wasn't it?
Yeah, Donatella Versace, yeah. But it had an enormous long train, longer than Princess Diana's, I think.
Really?
Honestly, this full works. The whole house was done out like a castle. Flowers all over the walls and windows and everything. And yes, it must have cost a bomb. They say it was a £7 million or £8 million house. I think it must have cost at least that just to put on the wedding. What? But of course, then we find out that her ex-husband tried to gate crash and there was a nasty scene and everything. And that's what's made the news. But I just wondered if you have ever had anything, I don't know, awful or very embarrassing or happen at your wedding.
Or somebody else's wedding.
Or somebody else's wedding, yeah.
A wedding disaster. Isn't it awful? We want to know about your wedding disasters.
Yeah, or things that just were horrendously embarrassing and went terribly wrong. Or maybe the story about how you overcame it, because time and again you get these stories, don't you?
Oh, you do. There's always a last-minute trauma, isn't there? I think that's what happened. Thankfully, we avoided trauma.
Good.
But 2 days before, when you just, you're emailing saying, just checking you're on, and got this, we had the harpist. Sounds very glamorous, doesn't it? We had a harpist. And emailed her, said, looking forward to seeing you on Thursday. And she said, yes, see you next week. Is that, no, this week. Thursday.
Oh.
Got the dates mixed up.
So you didn't get your harpist?
And she was booked in for that Thursday. So we had to so we didn't get her, no.
Did you scramble around to find another harpist?
We got another one.
Good Lord.
Very, very quickly.
I thought there were that many.
We got another one who works in London but was up in the lakes doing some teaching.
That is amazing.
And happened to have a Celtic harp with her, so a sort of smaller harp. But anyway, did the job very nicely. So that was disaster averted.
Yeah, well, luckily, but it looks as though Brittany's disaster was averted, but it could have been very, very embarrassing.
I tell you, what you should never do, you know when they say, does anyone object?
Oh, yeah.
If anyone jokingly says, oh, I do, apparently it stops the wedding.
Really?
You have to
That's
actually
something
stop
you
the
do
wedding.
not joke about.
No, even if you're joking about it, they have to stop the wedding.
Is that an awful moment? I mean, you know, there's a stony silence for a minute and then you have to
just
get
a
on with
minute. When we
things.
did it, the registrar then said, because we had a registrar and then a vicar, that way around, the registrar said, I think we've waited long enough.
Yeah. You've had your moment, you've had your chance.
So that was...
I must have gone through that.
You must have done.
Yeah, because it's always done at a wedding, isn't
Yeah.
it? I just don't remember it at all.
You blanked that out.
I have, funnily enough, yeah. Shall we move on? Let's move on. What time is it?
It's 6:20.
6:20. A very good morning to you. It's lovely to be with you. Do let us know where you're viewing from and how you're watching us. What country, what part of the UK. It'd be lovely to hear from you.
It would. Now, the Ministry of Defence apparently owns just under 10,000 houses in the UK that are empty right now and apparently falling into disrepair. Many of them are in communities that say their neighbourhoods are turning into a wasteland.
Yeah, and that would be awful, given our housing crisis. Our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, went to Devizes in Wiltshire to see the effect these MOT ghost towns are having on the people who live there.
A quiet street in Devizes. Too quiet. Children should be playing here. The hum of mowers, the buzz of family life, silent and forgotten. And not just on this road. There are 1,300 empty houses in Wiltshire alone, 9,000 in the UK. Wiltshire Council says it would love to buy them.
I don't have a housing crisis in Wiltshire, but I've definitely got a shortage. I'm having to build on greenfields all over the county to meet government housing targets. Yet there are houses here sitting empty that, as far as those housing targets go, simply don't exist because they're MOD housing.
And they're crumbling. Storm damage lies unrepaired. The post stacks up. The gardens unkempt and unloved. The MOD rents them from a private company to the tune of £500,000 a year, and that's just in Wiltshire.
I don't think they actually know what to do with them. And it makes me feel as if they've just deserted the place. And I mean, we live across from it, and I mean, it used to be lovely here. There was kids running about, and families and whatnot. And now it's just left to rot.
Rotting too, the sense of community.
There isn't a community. There isn't a community. All the houses are empty. To look out onto something that is so unkempt and derelict, really, is not very nice. Devalues our properties as well.
But it's not just about providing housing for local people. Wiltshire Council approached the MOD and asked them if they could use these houses for Afghan refugees and more recently for Ukrainian refugees. The answer to both requests was no.
We've approached, certainly initially with the Afghan refugees. I thought it was particularly appropriate where the Afghan refugees were coming over here because their lives were literally at risk because they've been helping our troops. And again, they were looking at short-term lets, but I'm afraid the MOD weren't willing to help there.
The Ministry of Defence told GB News, we manage around 17,000 service family moves every year and therefore need to retain vacant homes across the UK. We are actively working to reduce the number of surplus properties and by autumn 2023 aim to have just 10% of homes empty to facilitate essential maintenance. But with the cost of living crisis in full swing and a housing shortage on its way, many are arguing 10% is still way too high. Jeff Moody, GB News.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I understand that they do need to have empty homes because they've got to... They can't possibly run out if they've got people that they need to house for the armed forces.
But those are in disrepair.
Yeah.
And they look quite nice. They look as though
They do look nice.
do, don't they? That doesn't seem right at all.
No.
I wonder if that's just a case of the Ministry of Defence, because it is the Ministry of Defence staying stum and not and just not giving us the full lowdown. But they need to be held to account, don't they, for empty houses at the moment?
You'd think so. It does seem crackers. Anyway, let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But don't go anywhere. We've got plenty more to come. Do you fancy a bike ride today? in the buff. We'll give you a sight for sore eyes after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick.
Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning to you, 6:27. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, your radio, and online, of course.
Now it's the weekend and the sun is out, or it very nearly is. It was a nice afternoon yesterday, wasn't it, for most of us?
It was lovely. Had a barbecue.
Had a barbecue, great.
I know.
What a great day for a bike ride.
Oh, yes. But what about all that fancy cycling gear? My dad does a lot of cycling, and my brother. Lycra, leggings, the whole shebang. You don't need it, apparently. Save your money. Your birthday suit is going to do just fine today.
Yeah, and don't worry, if you did choose to go out and cycle in the buff, you wouldn't be alone, because there are 8 different naked bike rides happening today in the capital alone, with other naked bike rides scheduled all over the country as part of Bike Week.
Yeah, believe it or not, the naked bike ride does have a serious cause to promote as well. So let's talk to cyclist and comedian Elle Burt, who's here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Fully clothed for us this morning.
Yeah, well, I was told to put clothes on this morning,
Fair
so
enough.
I was following the rules.
Yeah, why do this? What's the point?
It's simply to highlight the vulnerability of cyclists on the road. I don't know if either of you have been naked in public, but you feel pretty vulnerable. And when you're alone on a road, on a bike with a lorry, a massive tanker, like, you feel it. Do you know what I mean? So it's also to highlight curb car culture. It's really early for me.
It is early,
I'm
don't you
normally
worry.
getting in at this time. I'm not getting up at this time. It's basically just to highlight all of the issues that we have around cycling, and we want real rights. And yeah, the reason we do it naked is because, you know, gets people talking about it, doesn't it?
To get on the... I know, I was, last year, I was in the back of a taxi in London, and I couldn't believe my eyes, because we were being overtaken by a horde, a swarm of cyclists, and then you double take, you think, they're not wearing anything. And you must get incredible reactions from people.
The reactions are what make it, to be honest. So I start out in, like, way west, so I start at Kew. And at that area, people are awfully shocked.
Are you on your own at that point?
No, so there's between sort of 50 to 75 of us that start there, but as soon as you start getting closer, it gets really busy. We're talking in the thousands when we get into central London.
So the posher the area, the posher, like in Kew, it's quite a posh area. They're sort of not terribly approving.
I mean, it's a mixed bag. I mean, the most we got, well, last year, I saw one woman cover her daughter's eyes.
No.
That was it. Like, oh no, there's naked people going past. My favourite moment was a little girl that just yelled, "I just saw his willy," and everyone just had a nice time. But you know, it's not a sex thing. It's not a crude thing.
Oh no! I mean, having seen it myself, it's just actually fun.
Oh, it's a lot
But I
of
do
fun.
admire your courage because I mean, the first thing that Stephen and I thought, don't you get a very sore bottom?
Well, I do wear pants when I do it purely because I don't want to lose the saddle, and it's a long bike ride.
Yes.
Especially, you know,
that
movement around. So that's the reason I wear pants. But I go completely topless. This year, I am going to paint sunflowers onto my breasts.
Oh, right.
Because I think that's just fun, isn't it?
Why not? Why is it that I mean, I've never quite understood it, why we are in this country particularly so prudish about nudity. Because we all have a body, and I don't.
There couldn't be anything more natural, could there?
Exactly.
So I don't understand it, and I think if we all look back, everyone loved being 4 years old, running around on the beach naked, and some of us just didn't grow out of that, and it just makes me happy to be naked. Like you feel free. Have you ever just taken your clothes off and jumped in a swimming pool, or in the sea, or gone on a bike ride? You just feel free. It's just fun.
When did you first start doing this then? I mean, or have you always been a naked cyclist?
I've always been pretty confident with my body, and that's what this is all about, basically. And it's not about being skinny or having the perfect physique. It's not a catwalk, it's a protest at the end of the day. So we get people from all shapes and sizes, people that have colostomy bags, scars, prosthetic limbs. It's inclusivity at the end of the day. For me, I got booked to do a gig naked a couple of years ago, because, you know, why not?
Yeah.
And then from that point onwards, I think British Naturism, they had my number, so they just kept booking me to do things. And now this year I'm a marshal for the...
Is it a growing trend? I mean, not the cycling thing particularly, but the idea of... Because, I mean, obviously we're more travelled than we used to be. You see a lot more nudity on European beaches, for example, especially with women being topless and things. Are we softening our attitudes, do you think?
Well, I hope so, because it's statistically proven that the more you see nudity in day-to-day life, the lower sex crimes are.
Yes, the less you sexualise the body.
Yeah, because the body's less sexualised. It's just a normal thing that you see, and it doesn't become something that's, like, sought after. So, interestingly, I was going to ask, if I was male, would I have been able to sit here with my top off today?
Probably not.
No.
You see?
Probably see.
It's kind of like...
It's an interesting point, because we had a guy on yesterday who was talking about his tattoos, who often appears with his top off, but he had a vest top on as well. I don't know if that was his choice or whether we asked for it. I don't know. But it's a valid point, isn't it? Because there is this thing about, you know, breasts are suddenly sexual, whereas a man's chest is not.
Yeah. And like, we're striving for equality, but I can't walk around with my breasts out, so to speak.
That's the other thing I was going to... I mean, have you ever on a cycle ride like this been stopped and charged with anything, or, you know, with...
Well, no, because it's completely legal to be naked in the UK and has been since 2003. As long as you're not
causing offence.
If you're not naked for intent, so whether it's sexual intent or to cause harm, which is definitely not what we're doing.
But I mean, when you all stop at traffic lights, that's much more of an open display, I suppose, isn't it? But nobody's ever thought to stop you and charge you with
you see, that's only because I remember
public indecency or whatever they would
donkeys
call
years
it.
ago when I worked on Channel 5, and we had the Naked Rambler in, so that was pre-2000.
Yeah.
But of course he was getting arrested left, right, and centre. Everywhere, and it's just he was just going for a walk with his rucksack on, but nothing else.
Yeah, so now you need to be proven to be causing distress. purposely. So any sexual act individually or as part of a couple or more, then yeah, that's illegal. Or flashing as well. So the law is basically written so you can't flash and you can't have sex in public.
Yeah.
And we're not doing any of that.
What do you do at the end of the ride? Do you all just dissipate and go your various ways, or do you go into a pub and have a knees up, or what?
It's a little bit of both. Some people disperse, some people go for a drink afterwards. It's all generally quite relaxed.
But if there are 8 different naked cycle rides in London today...
So it's one ride, but we start at different points and then we come in together.
And we were saying there are probably going to be others all over the UK. It's clearly catching on.
Yeah, it's catching on and people are becoming more used to it. I'm sure there's thousands of people out there that are completely disgusted and they think it should only be seen in the bedroom, but it's really difficult to ride a bike there, to be honest. So that's why we take to the streets to do it. And also, people see you a lot more when you're cycling around Westminster. Yeah. But you can't make noise around Westminster these days, so we'll be very quiet when we cycle around there.
You don't need to make a noise because
No.
noticeable. That's where I was when I saw you last year.
Well, look,
amazing.
Elle, it's really good to talk to you this morning. All power to your elbow and your knees, particularly today.
And every other part.
I'll be all right.
Yeah.
On a bike. Can't be easy.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good to talk to you this morning.
Thank you.
See, I'd love to know your views. It might depend on your age, particularly, what age group you're in, as to whether you think it's an awful thing or not.
If you'd asked my mum, she would have absolutely applauded that.
That's
yeah, I think that I think you can get prudish at certain ages, and then you sort of grow beyond it. I think older people actually are much more broad-minded than you think.
Oh, well, that's nice to know, isn't it? But I know some people just don't like it. I'm just thinking, well, why don't we? Can't be ashamed of bodies. Really.
No, it's one thing to hold that view, though, and it's another thing to actually do what Elle's done, isn't it? Would you?
No. No, I don't think I would. But I like the idea of it.
Would you if you
I wouldn't do it, though.
Would you if you were anyone other than Stephen Dixon on TV? You know, if you were...
I might be more tempted.
Yes, me too, I think.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't.
No.
But
it's that, and you see, there's
I would if I weren't me.
There's that photographer who does big group shots all naked, and he's done those in London.
Yeah.
And I've always thought, I'd quite like to do that.
And there's calendar shots where people are naked, but there's a cream bun in just in the right, something out of focus over there, or a plant pot that sort of hides your bits.
Yeah.
But I don't know why we're ashamed of bits. I really don't.
No.
And we've all got them.
No, this is the point, isn't it? Let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We've got some more views. I'll tell you what we'll do, though, because some of the views we've got are quite serious, on serious matters. Perhaps we'll do them in a couple of minutes while we just enjoy the relaxation of just being human beings with bodies for the next couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. We've got plenty more to come, including experts say that couples who share a bed get the best sleep. We'll find out why in a few minutes.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it is 6:39. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne, across your TV, your radio and online, right across the UK and worldwide, in fact.
Yeah, it's time to go through the newspapers now. And joining us this morning is journalist Ella Whelan and Kevin Schofield, political editor of the Huffington Post. Good morning to both of you.
Morning.
Right, should we start off with the story, I suppose, which is leading on a lot of the newspapers' front pages this morning, and we've been talking about it already, is the Rwanda deportations and Prince Charles, Kevin.
Yeah, it's a cracking scoop that the Times have got. So last night, the High Court ruled that the first flights, deportation flights to Rwanda, can go ahead on Tuesday. But they have, and it's not been denied by Clarence House, they've got some private comments that Prince Charles has made, basically calling the policy appalling. In particular, he's embarrassed because he will be representing the Queen at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Kigali later this month. So he's obviously embarrassed, he says, by this policy. He says he was more than disappointed at the policy and thinks the government's whole approach is appalling. And yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, I think, as well, because obviously sooner or later he's going to become king, and he has made a bit of a reputation for himself in previous years for making interventions in political debate, which is something that the royal family tends not to do.
But look, he's entitled to a view, though. We can't prevent him from having a view. It's down to whoever's leaked this, isn't it? Whoever's leaked this should be...
Well, then you wonder, who has this been leaked on purpose?
Yes, you do wonder.
To get it out there.
I don't know that it would have been, would it? Because,
I wonder,
he is having to backtrack. He's having to say I am totally neutral. It's a bit of it's thin ice, isn't it?
It is, although his view is now out there, and it probably doesn't do him any harm.
It's interesting that the newspapers, in the way they're reporting it, are making a point of the fact that it was a private comment, which suggests, I just sort of thought, well, that means that he sort of approves of it leaking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, Prince Charles he went in 2021, he went to Davos to announce his Terra Carta, which was kind of framed as this sort of very benign thing about, let's just be nice to the planet. It's just one of the rules, doing some kind of charitable act. But actually, within his announcement, he was hectoring world leaders about the need to put sustainability at the heart of economic policy, which, in the context of what we're going through at the moment, the cost of living crisis, is deeply political. It's a deeply political statement about how, it's shaping economic policy. So I would not blink an eye of surprise at the suggestion that he might have wanted this to be out there. He's been quite open about the fact that the crown, when it falls to him, is going to change. He's talked about it being stripped down, but also I think he's not. If he tried to follow in his mother's footsteps and do the whole kind of keep stum thing, no one would really believe him.
I don't think he'd be able to.
He's been so vocal about so many things, and just on the question of the Rwanda policy, I mean, I disagree with it politically. I don't think it's the right way to deal with immigration issues. But I mean, this policy is pretty much copy and pasted from the European Union playbook. I mean, they have had similar policies like this in relation to Libya and other places for quite some time. And we had, was it Justin Welby, someone come out recently in the last sort of month or so, condemning it, saying it was immoral. Now Prince Charles. I mean, where were all these criticisms when it was happening over in Europe?
Well, Sandy's been in touch. Morning to you, Sandy. Says, first the Archbishop of Canterbury, now the future king wading in. Both of these gentlemen are so out of touch with reality. Do they really have solutions, or are they just trying to get headlines?
Well, look, I mean, it was before the courts yesterday, and the judge said the flight could go ahead. There was nothing to stop it at the moment. We understand there will be some sort of appeal, but that could take a while. And so it will just rumble on, I guess. Meanwhile, Ella, in the Telegraph, Boris Johnson's announced that he's going to announce a sort of food and farming plan.
Yeah. putting it that way, announced that he's going to announce is a good one. Obviously, in the wake of what happened with the no confidence vote that he won, Boris Johnson is feeling the need to flood government with policy or strategy announcements. And this one, his Growth for Britain strategy, is relevant, and I think a lot of people would say is necessary. A question of food security has become, very important. The Telegraph reports that food prices and interest rates are set to rise again to 1.25%. So, people are looking at their shopping bills, skyrocketing, which is a very serious issue. His strategy, as far as he's outlined it, or as far as the Telegraph describes it here, it does not have a lot of detail. I mean, some, suggestions that he would make it easier to convert land into farms. I texted my farmer husband, whose family's a farmer, and he said, I have no idea what that means. That's just, what does that mean? More visas for, migrant workers to work in poultry farms.
Poultry.
And that, he makes a statement that farmers need to be more productive and that planning rules should be relaxed to make it easier to convert land into farms to grow fruit and vegetables. The central, one of the most important issues that farmers will tell you, and I hear it because my family tells me, in-laws tell me about it all the time, is that there is a huge push in relation to environmental policy to rewild, to plant trees on arable land, and all of that is still happening. And farmers, and actually, GBNews regularly has a sheep farmer in Wales come on to talk about the fact that the demonisation of particularly meat farming, raising livestock, is having a real knock-on effect to farmers' ability to live and work. And so, the Tories have to address that level of it, as well as making sort of slightly conflicting or empty promises about converting land. So a food security policy is definitely necessary, but it needs to have more detail than this.
Yeah, more detail. But on the surface, a good idea.
Well, it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah. Mind you, still under pressure. According to the Eye, Kevin, this morning, yet more plots to unseat him.
Yeah, so he won the vote, as Ella said, on Monday night, although it was a bit too close for comfort, I think, as far as he's concerned, although he came out afterwards and tried to be very...
Yes, but no one cares about the results of votes these days. Look at Brexit.
well, that's true. I mean, so basically now we're in a stalemate situation, effectively. The rebels haven't gone away. They still want rid of him, but they don't all agree, basically, on a mechanism in order to get rid of him. Now,
that's probably the real biggest problem, isn't it? There is no mechanism now.
There isn't now, unless, you get some maybe ministerial resignations, perhaps. If they were to lose these by-elections, that might increase the political pressure a little bit. But I've got an interesting line here that there's a sort of little-known rule in the Tory constitution that if 65 local party chairmen call an extraordinary general meeting of the National Conservative Convention, bit of a mouthful, they can hold their own vote of no confidence in him. And if that was to go against them, then the grassroots revolting, that might be...
Sounds unlikely.
A trigger. Well, apparently they tried it with Theresa May as well, because she survived a confidence vote. So they tried it to get rid of her, but she read the writing on the wall and went before it actually took place. He's not going to resign.
He doesn't read writing on the wall, does he?
He's not interested in that. So it might be a sort of groundswell of grassroots opinion might get rid of him. But right now, as I say, he's probably safe until the autumn. But it's a pretty shaky truce, really, between the rebels and...
Depends what he comes forward with policy-wise, doesn't it?
I mean, the irony about that little-known policy is that it was dug out in 2019 by Jacob Rees-Mogg to oust Theresa May. He was now all over the television saying, please, enough, leave Boris alone. So
that is indeed irony.
Things come back to bite you. But, the question has to be whether or not he's got the big ideas. And in the wake of the first sort of few days after the no confidence vote that he won, as Kevin says, narrowly, he made this big announcement about a new strategy, which the big announcement on housing was allowing people on benefits to own homes and nothing on building. So you just think, what a measly, rubbish kind of announcement.
Yeah. Sort of headliney.
Come up with something better to save your skin.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the airport chaos, which sounds horrendous and really is making even me think maybe I want to go away, is causing more people to actually book UK holidays.
Yeah, it's just day on day on day you see, here in the Express picture, and you can see that pictures of Bristol Airport, which was described as a zoo, with queues out the road all the way around the airport. Still reports of EasyJet cancelling flights daily, British Airways also cancelling flights daily, but then giving more kind of advance notice than EasyJet. And there just being no end in sight, basically. But as you say, the sort of flip side of this is that partly out of choice, some people in advance, and partly, as is reported in the Express, literally on the day of a cancelled flight, people are booking up places in the UK. So, bookings over the last 2 weeks were up 22% on the same period last year. The weather's in our favour. It's going to get very hot next weekend. And, of course, there's but so says the Express. Which,
the Express always says that.
but also there is the fact of the cost of living crisis, which is that there will be people who have snapped up some, cheap flights to Menorca who are currently lying on the floor of Manchester Airport in a great misery, and that's terrible. But there'll be others who have decided to try and save some money and will go, maybe...
Have you booked a holiday abroad?
I'm going to Cornwall next week. No, the week after, and I'm planning it so that I miss the Glastonbury traffic and try and get some sun. But I think that's all, I think it's what most people are looking to do is, you've had 2 years of a nightmare. This is the first year in which we've really kind of got back to normal after the pandemic. And it's just such a travesty that the airlines haven't planned for this.
Think about that.
They blame staff shortages.
Steve has just booked flights,
I've just booked 2 weeks in Spain, for August, but it's cabin luggage only. Because they are... I know that's what they say they want you to do.
I can't believe how much they're going to charge.
150 quid per person for the cabin luggage.
Just for the luggage?
No, sorry, not for the cabin.
If
you want the hold.
Oh, my.
So it's just like, well, you wouldn't do it. But they want to avoid all these checking queues. So they're just pricing you out of it.
What about you?
We booked last November. We were going to Cyprus. The first foreign holiday since 2018. Hopefully. It's all paid for and everything.
I know, that's what you have to say now, hopefully.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Craft ticket.
They've got to get it sorted out soon, surely.
It's just shocking.
Look, we're going to leave you two for now. Kevin, Ella, thank you, but we'll catch up with you a little bit later on.
And let's bring up to date with the headlines so far. A man has been arrested in Kent on suspicion of murder after a teenage boy was stabbed to death at his home in Manchester. The 15-year-old's mother was also injured in the attack in Miles Platting on Thursday night. Greater Manchester Police, who called the incident ferocious, said the 44-year-old suspect is believed to be known to the victims.
Brazilian police have found apparently human remains in the Amazon where a British journalist and indigenous expert disappeared. Don Phillips and travel companion Bruno Pereira were last seen on Sunday after visiting a remote part of the rainforest in São Rafael. Blood traces found on a boat of a fisherman who's been arrested as a suspect are now going to be tested.
1 in 6 workers say they would not be able to last a month financially if they lost their main source of income. The Building Societies Association says 1 in 4 people believe money worries affect their ability to do their job. It said people won't be able to save money in the coming months amid the cost of living squeeze.
Mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help hard-pressed families get medical cannabis. Charlotte Coldwell, who was in the headlines a few years ago, actually, on this issue, said dozens have had to pay privately to get a prescription when, obviously, cost of living is soaring. She said those over 18 can access treatment, but younger children are being left behind. Now, new research suggests that happy couples make the best bedfellows.
Adults who share a bed with their partner sleep better and are less likely to suffer depression than those who sleep separately.
Well, let's talk to sleep coach and author Beatrix Schmidt, who can tell us more. Morning to you. Look, I think this is great news. Do you agree with it? Is it better if you've got a happy relationship to sleep better with your other half?
I think in an ideal scenario, it is a great answer. Yes, of course. We want to have a good relationship and be able to sleep really well in the night and in the same bed. But I think one of the points I picked up on in the article that's quoted that people who never slept with their partner and spouse were more likely to suffer from insomnia than those who did most nights. And I think that's a really great place to start, because my question here is whether the insomnia came first or as an outcome. So in my practice, I see that.
There are lots of happy couples who choose to sleep apart for all sorts of reasons, aren't there? Obviously, maybe time shifts, shifting work patterns, and snoring always seems to come up as a major problem. And that's why very happy couples in every other aspect of life choose to sleep in separate bedrooms. But you're saying that actually that could be a bad thing.
So I think within the couple dynamic, you want the intimacy, and that is part of the bedroom, right? When we cuddle up together, even on a sofa, that's part of that relationship. But I think when people struggle with sleep problems, forcing that person to be in the same bed doesn't always work out the same happy way. So it's really looking at how we can develop sleep skills so that we can sleep together no matter what the couple dynamic is. And this is where, some people might sleep well and their spouse struggles with insomnia. That can create a lot of frustration in bed rather than happiness and great sleep at night.
You begin to tackle that.
Sorry?
How do you tackle that then? How do you deal with that?
So one of the ways to deal with that is, first of all, have a communication skill in place. So talk to your partners and say, what do you like, dislike about each other, sleeping habits, for example, and come to a middle rather than either pleasing the other person or actually just getting on with it and getting frustrated about it, right? So that's the first step, really.
Is that what you call a sleep skill then? Because I was just going to ask, you use that word skill. What is that? And how do you learn it?
Yeah, so first of all, being able to communicate to the other person, your spouse, partner, so on, what the parts that you're struggling with your sleep. The other part is, for example, your ability to practically able to prepare your body and your mind for sleep, rather than just getting into bed, fingers crossed, and let's see what happens. So that is a practical skill. We talk about sleep all the time, but we don't talk about the how to really make it happen as a skill set continuously. So that's one example there.
OK, look, Beatrix, really good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to take a short break, aren't we, Anne?
Yes, we are. Indeed, I agree with him.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's not going to feel like summer today across Scotland and Northern Ireland, windy with showers, and that wind will be touch and gale force around exposed western coasts of Scotland because of an area of low pressure, unseasonably deep for the time of year. That bringing tightly packed isobars across much of the north of the UK. A blustery day for many, but the strongest winds reaching the Western Isles, where gusts will be in excess of 50 miles an hour. That, in combination with the fact that we've got long spells of heavy rain into the Western Isles as well as the West Highlands, will make for an unpleasant day here. Showers also extending into Northern Ireland, southern and eastern Scotland. A few showers also for northern and western England, the Midlands and Wales, but fewer as you come further south, and the winds won't be as strong. So 23 Celsius for London, feeling pleasant here, feeling unpleasant where we've got 13 or 14 Celsius in the west of Scotland. We'll also see that persistent rain continue in the north of Scotland during Saturday evening. Overnight tonight, the rain pushes north, the low moves north and begins to fill, and so the winds will gradually start to come down. Still a breezy old night, but where we get clear spells in the south, with the winds easing here, perhaps single figures on the thermometer first thing tomorrow. A bright start then for much of England and Wales. You wouldn't rule out the odd shower for western parts of England, the north of England and Wales during tomorrow, but it's actually plenty of fine and bright weather, and with lighter winds, a more pleasant day on the whole. Scotland and Northern Ireland also fewer spells of persistent rain, but quite a few showers continuing, and on the cool side, 14 to 16 Celsius in Scotland and Northern Ireland. I think high teens, perhaps low 20s for England and Wales, and with lighter winds here and some sunny spells, feeling fairly pleasant. Monday looks generally fine across the UK, with lighter winds and fewer showers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 7 on Saturday the 11th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. Here's what we're going to be discussing today.
Prince Charles has privately criticised the government's plan to deport migrants to Rwanda, calling it appalling. Comes as the High Court ruled that the first batch of migrants could be deported sometime next week.
Boris Johnson has ordered ministers to do everything in their power to ensure the release of the 2 British men sentenced to death in the separatist region of Donetsk. What will this mean for the war in Ukraine and for Britain's further involvement?
And as the most lucrative and arguably controversial golf tournament in the world is taking place this week, just outside London, what does the future hold for golf? We're going to be talking to Aidan McGee a little bit later on.
And as ever, you can join in any of our discussions. Please do by send us your messages to gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
And if you want to watch on YouTube, please do. You can go to our GB News channel, but subscribe. It's all absolutely free and it means you'll get the very latest on the big stories that we're talking about today. Actually, just on the Rwanda situation, Will's been in touch this morning. Morning to you. He says, I'm watching in Oakley in Hampshire. It's a win-win for Boris. If it's struck down, the deportation thing, he can use it to attack the lawyers and charity workers and use it as an excuse for a power grab away from the judiciary.
Apparently, a lot of the lawyers who are involved in this are from a particular group of lawyers, whatever they call themselves, a group, that was set up by Sherry Blair. Fighting for human rights in various ways and places. So you could almost make it political if you wanted to, I suppose. David in Lincolnshire says, I think that all those who want to keep these migrants here should support them. Perhaps there needs to be a register of those showing their support and their tax codes adjusted accordingly.
Well, maybe. Carl says, if we as a country are prioritising housing immigrants ahead of our own struggling people, then we are fundamentally broken.
And we were talking a bit earlier about the fact that there's this report out that says that happy couples should sleep together because you both get a better quality of sleep.
Oh, I know
even
what
if you think not.
I know which one you're going for here, Anne.
Well, do you think?
Yeah.
Gary in Langham, morning, Gary. I hope the wife's not with you at the moment. Says, not always the best to bed share. My wife sweats like a racehorse at the end of the Grand National. I hope that's not true, Mrs. Berry.
Oh dear, I love that.
Yeah.
You're in so much trouble.
I don't know whether... I don't know what most people think. If you are a couple, should you sleep together? Posh people always used to, even if they were very, very happy, they would be intimate together, but then they would leave for their separate bedrooms.
You see, I think there's something a bit odd about that.
Well,
I do.
The upper classes have always done it.
Yes, well, it's because I'm common.
They like their own space, though, I suppose. It's nice to have your own space.
But there's something just very intimate about being together like that, and I just think I wouldn't want to go and sleep in a separate room like that.
Are we animals that really basically like to cuddle up at night?
Yes. Like it.
Yeah. OK, let us know what you think.
Yeah.
And maybe not quite in the same sort of way that Gary did.
Oh, I don't know.
GBViews at GBnews.uk, and I'm terribly sorry if the wife was watching at the same time.
I love it. That's absolutely fantastic. It's made my day, Gary. Look, let's head towards our top story this morning. And the Prime Minister has asked ministers to do everything in their power to ensure the release of 2 British men sentenced to death in the separatist region of Donetsk.
Yeah, they're Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner, and they were found guilty of mercenary activities and committing actions aimed at seizing power and overthrowing the constitutional order of the DPR. That's the Democratic People's Republic of Donetsk, or the Donetsk People's Republic.
Well, meanwhile, Ukraine's foreign minister says they're going to work with Britain to ensure the release of those 2 men, apparently.
Yes, well, for more, we're joined by political reporter Bill Bowkett. Hello there, Bill, again. Hi. And we were asking earlier, what on earth can they do? But Boris Johnson has entreated his ministers to do everything they can. It's a bit of a brush off that, though, isn't it? He's sort of saying, I don't know what to do, you do whatever you can.
Yeah, I mean, soft power is one thing, the power of language, of course. But as we know, having to negotiate with Russia, even prior to the war in Ukraine, was nigh on impossible. However, there are some solutions that are being proposed to this. One is potentially leads on to the precedent set by Nadine Zaghari-Ratcliffe in potentially paying a fee. Also, the fact that the UK has the backing of the United States, and further sanctions could be imposed on Russia, which they don't want to go by given the economic damage and toll that's already been caused. But what's seen as the most likely solution, and this was touted by Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, and also Robert Jenrick, former cabinet minister, who one of these prisoners of war as his constituency MP, says a prisoner swap. People that are currently detained in Ukraine, Russian.
And apparently there is one that President Putin is particularly interested in getting back.
Yes, I can't remember, but I think it's...
basically a friend of his.
No, I know the person you talk about. He was a highbrow politician, and he's also an oligarch as well, made his funds from there. But I think it's 5 people, which I think the Russians are currently asking for a potential swap for the release of these 2 British.
I mean, the money issue would be problematic, wouldn't it? With Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, we did historically owe a lot of money to Iran, so it sort of settled that debt. Whereas this would just be a ransom, in effect, which surely the government would never do.
No, they wouldn't, and they don't want to play into Putin's hand further in this as well. And given the economic damage that's already been caused by the war in Ukraine here in the United Kingdom and the rate of inflation, would we want to spend, millions of pounds? I think with Zaghari-Ratcliffe, it was close to £330 million. Would we want to do the same?
Which, frankly, arguably, we always owed them.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And she also wasn't under threat of death.
No.
Whereas these guys are.
Yes. And for what seems as illegitimate reasons, because these guys are combatants. They've actually allegedly lived in Ukraine for
they are members of the Ukrainian army,
exactly.
aren't they? They're not individuals, they're not mercenaries.
No, they're not. They're fighting alongside Ukrainians in their struggle for freedom. But Russia thinks that they count as mercenaries, and as a result, they've sentenced to death. And I think they have, 25 days left to appeal. And if they don't, then sadly...
But because this is a sham court in a sham People's Republic.
Yes.
The fact they have been left alive to this point and not sort of summarily executed, the fact that there is this sort of grace period for appeals or whatever else, does seem to indicate that they do want some sort of compromise, that they are willing to talk about something. And so if it is that sort of prisoner swap, well, there is some hope for the families there.
Yeah, there is. And the wife of one of them is appealed directly for this to occur. And actually, by doing this, it further legitimises that region of Donetsk.
Yes.
Because by what we saw in February, just before the conflict began, where they had that illicit referendum and they declared that they are now an independent state from the Ukraine, it is now just going to feel as though that they have the upper hand in this particular instance, because what else is there really to do in order to guarantee their safety and their lives?
And the person that you would rely on to negotiate, hopefully, would be Liz Truss, who was the very person who was entreating Brits to go out and fight with the Ukrainian army.
I know, which then she had to revert back and deny, and other ministers...
So it's horrendously embarrassing as well as awkward.
And she was in... within cabinet, there were massive squabbles over this. Her and the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace Ben Wallace was like urging Brits, do not go over there. It's not safe. The situation there is dire.
Yesterday, I mean, looking at other issues for the Prime Minister, we had the Rwanda ruling at the Royal Courts of Justice. A group was trying to sort of block these flights, the deportation flights. Now, they failed in that. The first flight should be going ahead on Tuesday. However, it's emerged that the Prince of Wales is not happy with it. He's called it an appalling scheme.
There's many ways you can criticise the Rwanda, the pilot, the £120 million pilot. Those on the left say it would be inhumane. It goes against European Convention on Human Rights, Refugee Convention. Whereas people on the other side of the political spectrum saying, well, it's a waste of taxpayers' money and it's not actually going to deter asylum seekers from reaching the UK. And Prince Charles has expressed that in a private capacity, so somehow this has managed to leak out of Buckingham Palace. And I think the worry about this, having read the story, is the fact that trust in the monarchy, given the marvellous Jubilee celebrations that we have, trust in the monarchy is kind of frail, and the popularity of Prince Charles is not as great, as given that he is going to be our new head of state and king eventually in the future. So if they're going to maintain that, have that central authority, and make sure that legitimacy lies, in the bicameral legislative system that we have in this country, in the House of Lords and the House of Commons, then really comments like these shouldn't be taken out. But of course, having get the coverage that it has, it's not looking good on the side of the Home Office.
No, I mean, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, Charles may not like it. A fair number of people, some of you at home, may not like it. But it has been deemed legal by the High Court. And an awful lot of voters do support it as a move, and it's trying to tackle immigration one way or another.
Exactly, and maybe one way in which Boris Johnson is able to win back trust is through red meat policies, and immigration is such a key issue in which they voted for the Tory party back in 2019, and also why they voted Brexit. In conjunction with that. So, yes, and obviously with the ruling, it's they concluded that it's actually down to the individual cases rather than the scheme as a whole. So what we might have in a situation where the flights go ahead on Tuesday, but then these individuals have their appeal, and then they have to come back to the UK and then have to be processed through the UK border force.
A lot of the problem is that we still think of Rwanda, when we think of the name Rwanda, we still think of genocide.
Of course.
And a hellhole of a place.
Yes.
And there are beginning to be stories coming up in the newspapers today, particularly in the Tory newspapers, suggesting that Rwanda isn't like that at all. And of course, Prince Charles is going there for a big meeting in Kigali, that maybe we need to re-educate ourselves about what Rwanda is actually like.
Yes, there's going to be that meeting of the G20, I think, over there in a couple of days' time. And of course, Paul Kagame, the president over there, he has had mounting criticism over potential human rights abuses, censorship of the media. But in this ruling that we had in the Royal Courts of Justice, it's deemed as a safe third world country, which is the requirements needed, under different conventions for asylum seekers to safely go from one country to another. And as Ella mentioned earlier when she was doing the newspaper reviews, that similar systems in place within the European Union. You have a country like Austria, who had their trial, now urging the European Union to implement a similar system.
How then, just on that note, how if that is the case, if this is being used across a number of EU countries, How then did they go to court yesterday arguing that it was a breach of the EU Human Rights Convention?
It's because to them it's not deemed as a safe country, a safe third world country, because of the human rights abuses and also because of treatment of certain groups, particularly the LGBT community, and to, you know, under convention, people would say that actually Britain is a safe country and that is their entry or destination, so why aren't they able to stay in here? But, as we've seen, different systems in place, and if they want to take it further, they'll have to take it on the individual level, and if they want to go even further than that over this juncture, then they would have to potentially go even higher up through the European courts. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see.
Bill, great to see you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
So let's move on, bring you up to date with what is in the news today. Brazilian police have apparently found what are apparent human remains in the Amazon River, where a British journalist and Indigenous expert disappeared. Dom Phillips and his travel companion Bruno Pereira were last seen on Sunday after visiting a remote part of the rainforest in São Rafael. Blood traces found on a boat of a fisherman who's been arrested as a suspect will also now be tested.
From September, student loan interest rates are going to be capped at just over 7% for a year, protecting against inflation. They would have had to see a rise of up to 12% by the end of the summer, but the Department for Education has stepped in. They're calling it the largest scale reduction of student loan interest rates on record.
1 in 6 workers say they wouldn't be able to last a month financially if they lost their main source of income. The Building Societies Association say 1 in 4 people believe money worries affect their ability to do their job. It said people won't be able to save money in the coming months amid the cost of living squeeze.
The mother of a boy with severe epilepsy urging manufacturers to help hard-pressed families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Caldwell said dozens have to pay privately at a time when the cost of living is soaring. She said those 18 or over can access treatment, but younger children are left behind.
Well, as the nation prepares to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the liberation of the Falklands next week, GBNews has been given access to previously unseen images of the conflict.
Now, the pictures taken at the time by a young Falklands photojournalist have gone on display at a special exhibition in the Chatham Dockyard.
You can see an extended feature on these powerful images on GBNews digital platforms now, but here's a sneak peek.
The surrender in full swing here. I mean, you can see all the detritus around the streets as well.
These Argentines are being rounded up by British troops. You can see, I think, Paras or Marines doing their best to round them up and at the same time getting these men to clear up a little bit. But the mess was unspeakable. This was one of our general stores here, which had been torched and was gone, but the smoke was still lingering. And when I look at these, I can almost still smell them. It was just a complete scene out of hell.
Lots of you getting in touch on this, actually. Jane has emailed in. Morning, Jane. She said, I remember so well the day my father came home after serving on HMS Antrim in the Falklands. There were wives and children cheering and crying as we watched the destroyer limp into Portsmouth Dockyard. It had been hit 3 times by Argentinian bombs. The crew standing to attention and saluting, spotted my dad immediately, and I was crying and waving, hoping he'd see me. Then they were given the signal to wave to us, and the sudden change in the atmosphere on the dockside was so emotional.
Wow.
I was just 8 years old, and I'd missed him so much.
Oh, I remember so many scenes like that of daddies coming home, sort of thing, to their children. It was just incredible. Peter says, I was working in the Philippines in 1982 for Westinghouse. There was a small group of Brits on our nuclear plant project, and we gathered together in one of their houses to have dinner in honour of the service people fighting. Huge admiration for Margaret Thatcher then.
Yeah, and Karen says, I was about 15. My brother would have been about 19. My memory of the Falklands War was him panicking about them bringing back conscription. He was plotting his escape.
Wow.
Oh, well, You can understand the concern, actually.
Because it was the first time, I think, for a generation that we'd had to face real war. And I think when we sent the fleet off, nobody quite imagined that it would be as brutal as it was. It was brutal in every way. I mean, the soldiers landed and they had to yomp from one end of the island to the other. And the very idea of our great big aircraft, our great big ships being bombed and destroyed and sinking. I mean, it was the first time anyone of my generation had to face anything like that. Couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe the news. Graham says, I was 16 in 1982 in my hometown of Wick in the north of Scotland. Strong memories of the Falklands War. Really.
Yeah. He also said, you missed that bit out, Anne. Not to mention the gorgeous Anne Diamond starting on TVAM in 1983.
That's right, yeah.
There you go.
Gorgeous, and definitely started GMB in 1983. It was the first Good Morning Britain, that was. It's lovely to hear from you with those memories, because it was so emotional. I don't know, when they first got the fleet together, and that took a long time, and then they sent them off from Southampton particularly, and all the wives were lined along the quayside, and all their men were sort of saluting along the line of the ship. And then suddenly, and I don't know whether they were given a command of any sort, suddenly the women all lifted up their T-shirts.
Really?
To show their men what they were going to miss. Yeah. It was an amazing moment. It was very old-fashioned, but, it was an incredible moment. Apparently, that's what they do, horses, sometimes.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. If you've got any wonderful memories like that of the Falklands, we'd love to hear.
We would. We're going to bring you a special day of commemorations next Tuesday here on GB News.
Quite something to look back to. To another story now. The Ministry of Defence owns just under 10,000 houses in the UK that are right now empty and falling into disrepair. Many of those houses are in communities that say their neighbourhoods are turning into a wasteland.
Well, our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody went to Devizes in Wiltshire to see the effect these MOD ghost towns are having on the people who live there.
A quiet street in Devizes. Too quiet. Children should be playing here. The hum of mowers, the buzz of family life, silent and forgotten. And not just on this road. There are 1,300 empty houses in Wiltshire alone, 9,000 in the UK. Wiltshire Council says it would love to buy them.
I don't have a housing crisis in Wiltshire, but I've definitely got a shortage. I'm having to build on greenfields all over the county to meet government housing targets. Yet there are houses here sitting empty that, as far as those housing targets go, simply don't exist because they're MOD housing.
And they're crumbling. Storm damage lies unrepaired. The post stacks up. The gardens unkempt and unloved. The MOD rents them from a private company to the tune of $500,000 a year, and that's just in Wiltshire.
I don't think they actually know what to do with them. And it makes me feel as if they've just deserted the place. And I mean, we live across from it, and I mean, it used to be lovely here. There was kids running about, and families and whatnot. And now it's just left to rot.
Rotting too, the sense of community.
There isn't a community. There isn't a community. All the houses are empty. To look out onto something that is so unkempt and derelict, really, is not very nice. Devalues our properties as well.
But it's not just about providing housing for local people. Wiltshire Council approached the MOD and asked them if they could use these houses for Afghan refugees, and more recently for Ukrainian refugees. The answer to both requests was no.
We've approached, certainly initially with the Afghan refugees. I thought it was particularly appropriate where the Afghan refugees were coming over here because their lives were literally at risk because they've been helping our troops. And again, they were looking at short-term lets, but I'm afraid the MOD weren't willing to help there.
The Ministry of Defence told GB News, "We manage around 17,000 service family moves every year and therefore need to retain vacant homes across the UK. We are actively working to reduce the number of surplus properties and by autumn 2023 aim to have just 10% of homes empty to facilitate essential maintenance. But with the cost of living crisis in full swing and a housing shortage on its way, many are arguing 10% is still way too high." Jeff Moody, GB News.
Seems quite shocking, doesn't it?
Well,
Any
does.
houses lying empty to the point where they're deteriorating as well. Lee in Bristol, morning Lee, says, shouldn't the MOD let these empty homes to the hundreds of veterans living on our streets? Shouldn't they honour our heroes that have given so much for Queen and country? Well, there has to be a better use for them than letting them rot.
Well, but the MOD doesn't own them, they lease them.
Well, they're responsible for them then.
Are they? I don't know how, because you've got to maintain them. Otherwise, you might as well just knock them down at some point.
And don't. It looks like a good community.
It looks nice.
Look, they look nice, and those houses should be nice.
Yeah.
We were talking earlier to a naked cyclist. There are apparently 8 different small groups getting together for a very big naked bike ride in London today. And apparently, because it's Bike Week, there are going to be lots more naked cycle runs throughout the country. If you're involved in one, do let us know. But she was terrific, and she was just saying, why not? What have we got to be ashamed of?
I agree.
And I was putting forward the fact that it's not older people who would be, I don't think, particularly condemning this. I think the older you get, the more broad-minded you get. Tony in Luton seems to agree with me. Hi there, Tony. He says, does nudity in public bother me? No. I'm 68 and I'm not bothered in the least. If people want to display themselves in public, good luck to them.
Well, I've seen it all before. Eyes right, though. Oh, dear, isn't happy. This naked bike ride malarkey is perverse. The riders should face charges for indecent exposure. Seeing grown men with and 2 veg on parade in front of the little girls is just wrong.
It's not on parade. They're just going through the city, biking, naked. But, their bodies, aren't they? We've all got them. Jeremy says, I fail to understand why anyone wants to be naked in public. It's an act of intimacy with strangers.
But I don't think it's intimacy.
Is being naked an act of intimacy?
I would disagree with you on that one. Mind you, as would Margaret Heald, who says she wants to buy a GB News naked calendar.
Yeah, we haven't made one yet. So we'll work on it.
Yet. There was a yet in there.
Well, we could work on it, couldn't we? Like I say, I rather like the
bigger mug.
What was the famous... The Calendar Girls calendar.
Calendar Girls, yeah.
They had mugs and flowers discreetly placed. So although they were naked, you couldn't see anything.
And buns.
Yes, that's right. Plates of cakes and... We could do something like that, couldn't we?
Here's someone giggling in there now.
Yeah, they're plotting it now.
Yeah, bit of fun. Raise a bit of money for charity.
But don't hold us to that. It might not happen.
I know. I think the bosses may not approve of that. But, you never know.
Goodness.
Look, don't go anywhere. We've got plenty more to come, including sport, and more sport with Aidan McGee.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's not going to feel like summer today across Scotland and Northern Ireland, windy with showers, and that wind will be touch and gale force around exposed western coasts of Scotland because of an area of low pressure, unseasonably deep for the time of year. That bringing tightly packed isobars across much of the north of the UK. A blustery day for many, but the strongest winds reaching the Western Isles, where gusts will be in excess of 50 miles an hour. That, in combination with the fact that we've got long spells of heavy rain into the Western Isles as well as the West Highlands, will make for an unpleasant day here. Showers also extending into Northern Ireland, southern and eastern Scotland. A few showers also for northern and western England, the Midlands and Wales, but fewer as you come further south, and the winds won't be as strong. So 23 Celsius for London, feeling pleasant here, feeling unpleasant where we've got 13 or 14 Celsius in the west of Scotland. We'll also see that persistent rain continue in the north of Scotland during Saturday evening. Overnight tonight, the rain pushes north, the low moves north and begins to fill, and so the winds will gradually start to come down. Still a breezy old night, but where we get clear spells in the south, with the winds easing here, perhaps single figures on the thermometer first thing tomorrow. A bright start then for much of England and Wales. You wouldn't rule out the odd shower for western parts of England, the north of England and Wales during tomorrow, but it's actually plenty of fine and bright weather, and with lighter winds, a more pleasant day on the whole. Scotland and Northern Ireland also fewer spells of persistent rain, but quite a few showers continuing, and on the cool side, 14 to 16 Celsius in Scotland and Northern Ireland. I think high teens, perhaps low 20s for England and Wales, and with lighter winds here and some sunny spells, feeling fairly pleasant. Monday looks generally fine across the UK, with lighter winds and fewer showers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
.30 morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, on your radio and online.
Yes. I've just been chuckling to myself because a lot of people have been getting in touch about sleeping habits because we were talking earlier, apparently, ologists are saying that you get a better quality of sleep if you cuddle up to your loved one and don't choose to sleep apart, even if there's a problem like snoring or something like that. Sleeping together gives you a better quality of sleep. And some really lovely ones, but William says, my wife puts a pillow down my side of the bed if I've been away. What does that say about me?
Interestingly, Teresa says, we stopped sleeping together 2 years ago. I'm such a light sleeper. Hobby sleeps deeply. I like a fan and the window open. He likes a thick duvet in the hottest weather. He's also a loud snorer. Since separate beds, our quality of life is so much better. Our relationship is also better.
That's because you're both getting sleep, I suppose, and that's important. Kevin says, I've been married for 47 years, always sleep well. We are very happy. Couple of smiley faces.
Yeah, and Jen says, we've been together 40 years, very, very happy together, both snore, both fidget, but get great night's sleep. Yeah, so there you go. So it's each to their own, I guess, on that one. But it's worth thinking about, isn't it, if you're struggling?
Well, I've been single a very long time now, and I don't think I could ever sleep with somebody else.
Oh, that's what I thought.
Yeah?
That's what I thought.
But it's
to be fair, but it's different.
It's different when you're all loved up, isn't it?
It is. OK, let's get loved up in the world of sports now, because Aidan McGee is here. Morning.
Morning. Are we GB Snooze now, are we?
Oh, very good. No, don't put that in everyone's head.
No.
I know a bit about sleep, actually. I did a piece for the Sleep Expert about 5 years ago.
Well, sleep is a fascinating subject.
It is,
because you'll need it so badly.
He said the biggest myth is this whole thing about 8 hours. Going to bed at 10, getting up at 6, going to bed at 11, getting up at 7, that kind of stuff.
No, you need at least 10.
Because he said that he goes around to football clubs all around the world, and we all think that's something that comes naturally to us. I mean, don't forget, time is a man-made construct.
Yeah.
He was going to, like, Spain, he was going to Barcelona, Real Madrid, and he was looking at the normal hours of sleep, and he thought, oh, hang on a minute, they do this thing called siesta. How do I work around that? So he was giving me all sorts of tips about sleep. I set him up with a footballer to go and give him a sleep consultation, which is worth about $2,000, and got it for free. We did it on TV. And get all sorts of tips about what to...
What sort of tips?
Well, it was things like, he said he was going to do sleep consultations with players, and he was finding that they were leaving the heat on all night and they were waking up dehydrated, so they weren't giving their all at training because they didn't have the physical capacity to do so. So it seems quite obvious now, but it's not something I would have thought of.
No.
He was saying, before you go to bed, make sure the last light you see is natural light as opposed to tech light from a phone or a laptop, and the same in the morning as well.
Well, how can you do that? That means you'd have to go to bed while it's still daylight.
Yeah,
the last light you see is
of course, it's not not everything is achievable at certain times of the year, obviously. But if you can, you should probably try and do that. He also talked about things like cars as well, the way you have your sleep, the way you have your body adjusters in your cars. So a lot of players will drive in sports cars, are leaning back too far, is affecting their hamstrings, and the sleep is meant to aid recovery for that. But it's a difficult job when you've been sitting in that position all day and you put strain on your ligaments and on your sinews and hamstrings and etc. So it's very, very interesting. And he's written a book. He wrote a book called Sleep. So,
and it's a huge subject because so many people. I mean, we all need sleep, and we need proper quality sleep.
Yes.
And if you struggle,
it affects everything in the rest of your life.
He also said about mattresses as well. He said that it's a big myth. This guy worked for Slumberland. Remember them back in the 90s? Yeah. And he went and consulted with Manchester United. 2 players came to him. Ryan Giggs was one of them, and said, "Look, I'm going to finish at 28 if I don't sort my sleep out. I don't know what it is that's wrong with me, and it's affecting my injuries." Ryan Giggs ended up playing until he was 41. Not just because of that, he had a yoga regime as well.
But he got a decent mattress.
He said that you can spend £5 on a mattress. Yeah. He said that you can get a perfectly good one for £300. Yeah.
Really?
Absolutely fine. Yeah, he said it's a bit of a myth. It's marketing and all the rest of it. And he's somebody. This is a guy. This guy's Nick Littlehales. He's based in Nottingham. He's a fascinating individual, and he told me everything there was to know about sleep.
You've got to change your mattress comparatively regularly, haven't you? It's like sort of every 7 years or something.
Yes, but he said you can get toppers as well, which is pretty
toppers
good.
make a difference.
If you look back to the London 2012, the Olympians there, the cyclists particularly, they were carrying these bags that no one really knew what was in them. It was actually a sleep kit, so provided by Nick Littlehales. And they were moving around base to base in the Olympic Village, and they were using it to sleep on. He does sleep consultations for football clubs. If a football club know they're going to stay in a hotel for a weekend, he will go there on behalf of Manchester City, for example, and go there 24 hours in advance, look at the Hiltons and look at the Penny Hill Parks and all the rest of it, and say their beds aren't good enough. You're going to need to bring your own kit.
Sometimes, though, when you go to a good hotel, you get a better night's sleep because they spend a lot on mattresses.
They do. I mean, even if you look at for World Cups and things, it's even more important because the team's going to be based there for 6 weeks.
I can't believe that.
We need to get them in.
But it just shows, doesn't it, that they spend money on certain things they know are important in the world.
Without doubt. I knew another guy up in Alderley Edge when I lived in Cheshire. He used to go on to the team coach in the morning of games and kit it out. He'll furnish it with food, the right kind of food that they needed. And it was a good contract for
If we were all looked after, like, Novak Djokovic or whatever, because they pay a fortune for people's advice.
They do,
like
yeah.
this,
It's part of their
If we all looked after like that, we'd probably live longer and healthier.
Yeah, we would, yeah. Well, you are seeing sports people last longer and longer. Their longevity, it's not... I mean, Ronaldo and Messi are going to go into their 40s, I think, the first players to play at the top level in their 40s.
Oh,
that's sports science, exactly, yeah.
Ancient. Let's talk about some...
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do some actual sport. What's going on with football in Southgate?
So England are playing this evening, 7:45 against Italy. He said that this won't be a revenge match for the defeat last summer in the Euro 2020 final, which is pretty much just as well, because I think England could win about 38-0 and it still wouldn't account for... wouldn't avenge the defeat last summer. That was a crushing blow, getting to the first final in 56 years, losing on penalties. But Italy is a strange team. They didn't qualify for the World Cup in 2018. First time that happened since 1994. They go and win the Euros in England, which was an astonishing achievement, really, because it wasn't the Italy team that we know from the 90s. And then they've just failed to qualify for the World Cup. So they've got this abject failure either side of this real pinnacle. But there's the Nations League tonight. It's at Molineux. England, there are only going to be 3,000 supporters there tonight because they're all children, and that's because... Remember the supporters at Wembley last summer, they stormed the barricades, didn't they? So this is our punishment, much the same way as last Saturday, England played in Hungary and there were 30,000 children actually when they arrived there, but 3,000 today at Molineux. They're inviting under-14 kids from within a 30-mile radius of the stadium to come and see the game. And Southgate was quite determined this week in his assessment. He said that this is a national embarrassment to the country. We can't. It's shame on us for not being able to host a full house. The whole idea of taking it to the regions, like Molineux, for example. Molineux hasn't held an England international probably since just after the Second World War. So you should have a full house there. Unfortunately, it's just going to be 3,000, and it's because of the bad behaviour of our supporters last summer. So that's a black mark against us. In terms of the actual game itself, well, England salvaged some pride on Tuesday after Saturday's defeat against Hungary. They got a 1-1 draw in Germany, so that was decent. And these Nations League games, they're competitive matches, and I think that compared to playing a friendly, as they would have done 4 or 5 years ago, it's much better for the players. It's a much easier argument for the clubs for the international federations to go to their clubs and say, look, we need your players after a marathon season. At least they were playing competitive games. We're not just lounging around playing friendlies and not even touching each other or tackling each other. So it does make for a better spectacle, but the players after this evening will get a long break and they deserve it.
Meanwhile, very quickly, arguably the most controversial golf tournament.
I don't think there's a doubt about that. Yeah, exactly. It's underway, and it's a tipping point this weekend. I mean, we discussed it just off air a moment ago, didn't we? We'd seen players who were slightly past their peak taking this big payday with the Saudi-backed Live Golf Series. The issue now is that I think there's a tipping point this week. Bryson DeChambeau has defected. He's 28 years old. He won the US Open in 2020. He's in the prime of his career.
Do you think that could start an avalanche of other players who are big names now?
They're in it for the money. A football agent said to me the other year, he said, Aidan, the game's about making money. And I was quite shocked. And I went away with it. I thought, you know what? As uncomfortable as that is to hear, he's probably right. And it's the same for golfers. And just put it into some kind of context, you can win a low-ranking tournament with the Live Series and earn $4 million for winning it, compared to $2.7 million for winning a major. And you're still going to be able to compete in the majors, even if you defect. But the PGA, who are the established golf series, they are saying that now if you join the Live, you're not welcome back in the PGA. The European Tour probably can do the same. It's a seismic period for golf, it really is.
Yeah, well, they're going to find themselves running out of competitors.
It's very, very political.
It's very political, isn't it?
Aidan, thank you. We're going to catch up with you a little bit later on, I know, so we look forward to that.
Cheers.
Yeah, and do stay with us. We've got plenty more to come. We'll be looking through the newspapers and asking what the royal family have been up to this week. Quite a lot, as it turns out.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning again. Still lots of people getting in touch with their sleeping habits.
Yes.
We'll
and most of them are readable.
Yeah, yes, indeed, which is good news.
Yes.
But shall we have a look through the newspapers now, through the insides of the newspapers as well, with journalist Ella Whelan and Kevin Schofield, political editor of the Huffington Post. Morning both, thanks for coming back. Kevin, we're starting with you and these awful fuel costs.
Yeah, so I think it's probably the most tangible example of the cost of living crisis. If you've got a car and you go to fill up, you instantly notice how little fuel you're getting for your money compared to even a couple of months ago. And Rishi Sunak, unsurprisingly, is coming under pressure to go even further to reduce fuel duty. If you remember at the spring statement in April, he cut it by 5 pence, which at the time seemed like a lot.
Did it?
Well, it was more than... It was at the upper end of expectations, really. But it went like that. It's long since been swallowed up.
They need to start cutting it by 50 pence, never mind 5 pence.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. So the Cabinet Ministers are making the point that half, if you add fuel duty and VAT together, half of what you pay is going straight to the Treasury, which obviously means that the Treasury are making a lot more money from it than they were
Which
previously.
arguably becomes a form of tax just on the motorist.
Exactly.
It's an extra tax.
So at a time when Rishi Sunak is coming under pressure to cut tax, so income tax, for instance, they're saying, look, actually fuel taxes is what you want to be hammering, because that's where most people, as I say, are noticing it in their pocket. But he says we can't do that unless we're on a stronger fiscal footing. The government doesn't have a lot of money because of the pandemic, so they can't afford to do it. So he's under a lot of pressure. There's a budget coming in October, but can people wait till October for the government to...
Well, not if they can't afford to fill their car in order to do vital things, including getting to work. And they also can't then go to the railways to get to work because there are no trains because everybody's on strike. You know, what are people meant to do?
Well, quite, exactly.
You've got to, I mean, at that point, you have to turn to government and say, you've got to do something about what is an impossible situation.
Yeah, and if the government is obviously, you know, getting back to Boris Johnson's own personal problems, he's desperately trying to get back on the front foot, improve the Tories' opinion poll ratings. This is something that you would think might help to do that. But there seems to be, I think, a bit of tension between Rishi Sunak and the rest of the Cabinet, because he's the one holding the purse strings and he's saying, well, actually, hold your horses, we can't really afford it.
Sticking with the Telegraph, Ella, the Education Secretary is saying don't use rail strikes to revert to home learning. There's not that many kids go to school on a train, is there?
Well, that's certainly a question that lots of people are asking on social media. You know, the news of the strikes has been... It's turned into... Criticism of the strike has turned into framing around why would you do this to children? And I think this very kind of, I would say, crass way. And Zahawi is responding to... I mean, he's already made comments saying that this is basically that it's selfish for rail workers to do this at a time when lots of young people have exams. And he's doubled down on that now with the news that some schools are planning to close within that week between the 21st to the 20th and the 24th. Because they say that they know that teachers aren't going to be able to get in, and they're going to telling young people to go back to remote learning just for that period, which is, you know, it's just unacceptable to say that it's going to become the norm that at any time there's a hiccup or a difficulty in society that schools will shut. I mean, this is part of the pandemic hangover in that it's normalised the idea that school would be closed. I mean, when I was at school, it was, you know, even if there was blizzards, it would be, you know, the last resort would be to close school. And we've lost that kind of sentiment of the importance of education. It's also the case that, you know, Nikki Aiken, the Conservative MP, has come out and said that striking during the exam period is unforgivable. And there's this real kind of, you know, really cheap attempt to try and suggest that the consequence of children's, you know, what we've seen in the last 2 years of kids' education being sacrificed by the closure of schools is now all the blame is going to be on RMT workers, who are these sort of, you know, the devil incarnate people who are sacrificing kids' well-being. That's completely passing the buck for a Tory MP to talk like that.
It does seem a bit odd. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm no fan of strikes because, from a very personal perspective, it causes chaos for individuals. Not to say they don't have a point that needs to be made. But no, you can't suddenly start blaming them for everything.
Well, I mean, the RMT and indeed other unions that are engaging in strikes across different sort of industries have pointed out that there is this really stupid idea about how strikes work. Strikes are meant to be disruptive. They're meant to be, you pick them, you know, it's funny that no one's going on about Glastonbury because I suppose that would reveal people's class prejudices if they moaned about it being at the time of Glastonbury. But, you know, you've got Glastonbury, you've got sporting events, you've got exam periods. That week is, if you were going to have a strike, it's the time to do it, to really show bosses what you mean. And so, you know, it comes down to a question of whether or not you support strike action. I do. And
do you support this particular strike for this particular reason?
I do, because I think that, you know, the RMT have a long history of being very forthright in arguing for better pay and better working conditions at times.
But their average wage is well above the national average, isn't it?
I know, but, you know, you can argue that it's all relative, but we've been talking about the fact that there's a cost of living crisis, and their argument is that wages are not meeting with, you know, inflation rises and other things, and that there's been ongoing battles. And, you know, I think that other workers across other industries should take a leaf out of their book, because we're constantly, you know, commentators like us are constantly going on television and saying, well, what can you do about gas prices? What can you do about food prices? What can you do about this? The world's going to hell in a handcart. And this is the one thing that workers can do very effectively to make sure that their wages manage to let them survive on a very basic level.
But their average wage is well above the national average. I just wonder what's happened to community spirit. We've just been through a pandemic.
The drivers have
It may be just the drivers. They earn very well,
don't
don't they, the drivers? But they're still going on strike.
I think community spirit is, the community spirit is about, do you understand the importance of worker solidarity? Perhaps that's, revealing my political affiliations. But, the idea that it's selfish for workers to go on strike is
when
a kind of
come out of a pandemic.
misunderstanding of the nature of what you do when you take industrial action, which is, of course, it's inherently selfish. It's about your wage and your industry. But it's a more broader point about saying that, workers, when they need to, have to remind bosses of their importance of their labour. And, if you might call that selfish, I call that an important part of workers' rights.
We're out of time. You
Are we
two?
already?
Yes, we are.
Oh.
Kevin, Ella, thank
Sorry,
you very much
Kevin.
indeed. Look, just to lighten things up slightly before we have a look at the headlines, because we've been talking about sleeping together. Jason said, I love this, Jason. My wife and I have cuddled each other in our sleep for 35 years now. Her menopause, however, when she suddenly gets very hot, jumps in her sleep, does a violent star-shaped thing while throwing off the quilt, loud puffing, is something else. Still, and I always will, love her to bits.
Yeah,
that's
lovely,
nice.
yeah. And Joanna says, I work permanent nights and my partner snores loudly, but we would never think of separate rooms.
There you go. Keep thoughts coming through as we bring you up to date with the headlines at 7:49. And Brazilian police have found apparently human remains in the Amazon River, where a British journalist and Indigenous expert disappeared. Dom Phillips and travel companion Bruno Pereira were last seen on Sunday in a remote part of the rainforest in São Rafael. Blood traces found on a boat of a fisherman who's been arrested as a suspect will now be tested.
From September, student loan interest rates will be capped at 7.3% for a year to protect against soaring inflation. Borrowers would have faced up to 12% at the end of the summer, but the Department for Education has stepped in, calling it the largest scale reduction of student loan interest rates on record.
And 1 in 6 workers say they wouldn't be able to last a month financially if they lost their main source of income. The Building Societies Administration says 1 in 4 people think money worries affect their ability to do their job. It said people won't be able to save money in the coming months because of the cost of living squeeze.
The mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help hard-pressed families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Caldwell said dozens have had to pay privately to get a prescription. At a time, of course, when the cost of living is soaring, she said those aged 18 or over can access treatment, but younger children are being left behind.
OK, let's catch up with all things royal. And that means we need Angela Levin in the studio. Thankfully, she is here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, look, we've got to start off with the Prince of Wales and his private comments about the Rwanda relocation scheme, which have been somehow miraculously made public. Has he spoken out of turn?
Well, I think yes, really. I mean, I'm a great fan of his, but I think when you're near to be a king, you actually mustn't say these things. It mustn't get political. And I think it was a mistake. I wonder who actually spilt the beans.
Well, that's
really.
what we're wondering, because any of the newspapers that have been reporting it, I think it was Times, wasn't it?
Yes, it's on the front of the page of the Times.
He's called the Rwandan deportation scheme. Yeah, he's called it appalling.
Yeah.
But Clarence House have not denied that he said it. You wonder whether it was deliberately leaked, do you think, or accidentally?
Well, I have one of those nasty minds that think it's deliberately.
Really?
Yes. I mean, I think some people are against him. I don't think you can trust anybody when you're in his position. You have to be very, very careful what you say and to who you say it to.
I mean, he's going to have to temper this, isn't he?
I think one of the reasons he doesn't like it and thinks it's very difficult for him is that he's soon going to take a Commonwealth meeting, and I don't think he wants to be attacked by people saying that, you know, it was racist and it was wrong. I think that might be an element in it, in which case it could have been differently said, but I bet you that they didn't actually use his words, but just took the overall impression that he gave.
So in this meeting in Kigali, in Rwanda, that he's going to, if, yes, he does come up against anyone saying what you're doing is, what your country is doing is wrong, all he has to do is chortle and say, well, you know my private opinions on this or something, because now we do.
Interesting, isn't it? I don't know if it's on our list, but I wanted to reflect on the Prince William stuff. It was in the papers yesterday, but I was saying yesterday, I think it's a shame that it's made the papers, that he's been out working for the big issue on the street, just because I liked the fact that he was doing it on the quiet, on the QT.
I felt a bit the same, because I thought that he should have disguised himself a bit more. It was quite obvious who it was, even though he wasn't wearing super smart clothes. But I think it was a marvellous thing to do. And I remember when he was younger, he slept out overnight to see what it was like on a cold night when you're homeless. So I think he's very compassionate. And the more he ages, the more compassionate he gets. But somehow, once it's on the front page of the paper, it just looks as if it's a bit of a phony.
Yes, I think he was just... I think the person who was selling the big issue with him, in the end, asked for a selfie and took one. And then I think a couple of other people took just...
Yes, one very beautiful tourist took one, leaning upright against him.
If you suddenly spotted Prince William outside your tube station selling the big issue, you probably would say, can I have a quick selfie or something?
Yeah.
But that's how it's got out, which seems a shame in a way.
It does seem a shame, but it's nice to see him doing some good work and things.
Apparently he earned far more than the man who was also doing it next to him, who was showing him the ropes. He's sold loads of copies, and I bet loads of people recognised him, but didn't actually want to say.
Yes, yeah.
Can we just ask you... Sorry, I was talking about Prince Harry. On reflection, Harry and Meghan, I mean, all of the pictures I saw, he looked really grumpy and as though things hadn't gone according to plan. And that's, I think, what you think too, isn't it?
Oh, yes, absolutely, totally. I think he felt that he would come home and everyone would open their arms and welcome him because they were so pleased to have them both. But, of course, they don't trust him. It's not they don't love him, they don't trust him, and they don't dare say anything because he'd sell it somewhere to an American TV company or to Netflix. And you have to be very careful. There were rumours that were wearing wires, but there's no evidence of that.
Oh,
but
surely.
They did in New York when they went round on a pseudo-royal visit.
What, they were wearing concealed
in New York. Yes, definitely. But there's been a lot of rumour, but I think it could be drummed up just for Twitter, actually. But they did make sure that they couldn't have any photographs of him with the super royals because they didn't know what he might use it for. So they did seat them way apart.
And he sensed that? He clearly
sensed it?
Well,
of course, because he wasn't with them. He's sixth in line to the throne, and he's in with much less important royals on the other side. And it was such a big difference. It was very hard to get a close-up of them. You know, the camera could only take a very...
I've known people who've said when that happened that they thought that was the wrong decision by the royal family to segregate him in that way. They just thought it didn't seem the right thing to do.
Yes, I disagree with that. I think he's been so bad. I mean, I loved him, really, when I spent a year with him writing his biography. He was a great character, but I think he's changed and all the worst part of him has come out. We've all got a bad bit, but I think... And I think he's been so...
at all when we saw him.
No.
And flew off very quickly afterwards.
Yes, I think they decided that... They refused. They were invited to everything, actually. It's not saying that they weren't, but they decided they didn't want to. And I think he was absolutely furious about what happened, very demeaning. And they flew back very quickly. I think there was a lot of pressure on small children to have this very, very long flight in a couple of days. But I think you can't be very rude about people and say, you know, he's very disappointed in his father and William's, you know, stuck in this terrible organisation and expect people just to ignore it and to be very, very friendly. If you apologise, it's one thing. You know, I was going through a bad patch, it's one thing. But actually not to do that and to stay very aloof, I don't think you can expect people to welcome you in the way you would like to be welcomed.
No, I think that's a fair point. Angela, great to see you this morning.
Yeah,
as
thank
always.
you.
Thank you very much indeed. Don't go anywhere. We've got all the top stories heading your way in just a moment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you. And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Morning, it's 8 o'clock on Saturday, the 11th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. Here's what we're going to be discussing this morning.
Prince Charles has privately criticised the government's plan to deport migrants to Rwanda, calling it appalling. It comes as the High Court ruled that the first batch of migrants to be deported sometime next week, that could go ahead.
Boris Johnson has ordered ministers to do everything in their power to ensure the release of those 2 British men sentenced to death in the separatist regions. I can't say that, separatist region of Donetsk. But what will this mean for the war in Ukraine and for Britain's further involvement?
And with inflation not only affecting the price of your fuel, but the price of your car, we're asking an expert why second-hand car values are, for the first time in as far long as I can remember, going up.
Yeah, as ever, you can join in any of our discussions or send us your messages by emailing gbviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
And if you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. It's absolutely free and it means we can send you the very latest on the big stories that we're talking about today.
Yeah, it's an interesting one about the value of second-hand cars is going up, 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 because I've got an old car that I really ought to get rid of. And at one point, it was valued at one value, and it's actually been going up steadily. I keep going online to see if... And it's going up a lot.
It's all to do with chips.
Yeah.
So those microchips, because there's a huge shortage of microchips in cars, and they use loads of them now.
So there are fewer new cars because of the microchip problem?
Yeah, it's much harder to get a new car. So, and there's a much longer wait for a new car. So therefore, there's a higher demand for second-hand cars, so the value goes up.
And I wonder when it'll stop, because I keep sort of going online and thinking, has it gone up a bit more? And it has. Has it gone up a bit more? And it has. When do I sell?
It will stop at some point.
It will, yeah, and there'll be a crash, and then I won't know what hit me.
Then you'll be down to 500 quid.
Yes, that's right. That's
you
right.
go.
Yeah. How did you know that's what it was?
Ah, there you go.
You've seen it.
Now, as the UK prepares to send its first batch of migrants to Rwanda, the Prince of Wales has reportedly privately criticised the government's plan.
Yes, it was a private conversation, but he has been quoted, and it's in all the press right now. He said that he thinks that the British approach, deporting to Rwanda, is appalling, although his office has reiterated that he does remain politically neutral.
Well, it comes as campaign groups say they're going to keep fighting after losing a High Court bid to stop the government from flying migrants to Rwanda, whilst an appeal against the ruling has been launched.
Yeah, well, so let's get more reactions now from the Chief Executive of Ipsos in the UK, Kelly Beaver. Hello, Kelly. Hi. Hello. It's fascinating, isn't it, that just Prince Charles saying something can change people's minds, or maybe not. What are the polls telling you?
So the British public have been becoming more and more confident and open to the idea of having migrants in the country, actually, over the last couple of years. We've seen a big change from 2015 on people's views of our immigration policy and also on refugees. 3 in 4 say that they feel people have the right to seek refuge in our country, and that is quite a high proportion of people. Prince Charles himself, we've also been polling on the royal family quite a bit over the last, over the last 40 years, but no doubt in the last few months
days,
as well.
I can imagine.
Yes, absolutely. And around half people think he will make a really good king. Obviously, William comes out slightly higher, but his own poll ratings, comparatively to his mother, not as high as that. But,
yeah, that's changed quite a bit, hasn't it? Because up until now, as you said, Prince William was way ahead and people were wondering whether the monarchy should skip a generation. But now people seem to be a little more tolerant of Charles. And some people rather like the fact that he's outspoken.
That might be very true. I think his poll ratings, he does poll okay, and we do believe that when he does finally ascend to the throne at some point, people will rally behind him. There has only ever been really one monarch in many people's lifetimes in the UK, of course, so we don't know much apart from having our Queen. However, it is expected that people will rally behind.
In terms of the latest polls at the moment, what is scoring high in terms of people's concerns at the moment, their priorities?
Well, this probably won't be a bit of a surprise to you, but it is inflation and it is the economy. Those are the top issues coming out. Cost of living for the British public is very, very top of mind at the minute. Other issues which, like politics and people's faith in politicians, is still up there, but in relative terms, cost of living is really very dominant now.
How is Boris doing in the polls?
Well, he's tracking better than he was in January, but he is still very much, I would say he's down, but he's not out. The latest poll we conducted was over the last few days, looking at how people feel the confidence vote reflected their personal views. And around half of the British population believe that that was the wrong decision. But when you go beneath the surface of that and you look at his own party supporters versus those of Labour, he still has quite a substantive amount of support amongst those who voted Conservative back in 2019. It's as high as 2/3 who said that was the right decision for Conservative Party voters, and it's the direct opposite for Labour. Obviously, the Labour Party supporters believed he should have went.
You see, that's interesting, isn't it? So in terms of how this is ultimately going to play out when it comes to the next general election, that seems to be saying that, 148 Tory MPs have upset quite a number of their constituents.
Well, there's a couple of tests coming up for Boris Johnson, and I think that it's a very difficult environment. When I say he's down but he's not out, he's now playing in what is the opponent's safe space. Cost of living is very much a Labour safe space. And we also have the 2 by-elections, which are coming up in Wakefield and Tiverton as well. So there's a lot of signals that his MPs will be looking out for in the next 3 to 4 months to really see whether he can come back from this, because it's quite a low base. He's sitting with a net satisfaction rating at the minute of -36, which in relative terms, there have been others who have been lower than that in the past, but not many.
But as an experienced pollster, you would expect a government midterm to always be unpopular, wouldn't you?
We would, and when I say at the same point, there have been 2. So you've had May and you have also had Major at that same point with lower ratings than he had. May resigned 6 months after a similar sort of situation. And so I think it is a tricky situation for him to come back, given the climate as well amongst public opinion. We've seen biggest levels of concern around the economy. It's the worst we've seen for 40 years in terms of the public saying they don't think things are going to get better in the next 12 months. The majority of people are telling us that they think the country's going in the wrong direction rather than the right direction. And the kind of policies that will really matter at the minute are things like what government are going to do around cost of living.
Is there any faith, though, in what the Labour Party is offering as an alternative?
That is a perfect question, because I was about to say, however, whilst he's been down, it isn't as if the Labour Party have been making substantive gains in that period. So there's still only a third of the public who think that Labour are ready to govern. And Keir Starmer's in a negative satisfaction rating as well. And so they have a lot of work to do. Both parties have a lot of work to do to gain both support and confidence from the general public.
Historically, then, I mean, as I say, there are certain parallels to how things have been in the past. If there was going to be a general election and Labour were likely to win, would you expect them to be doing better in the polls than they are now?
Yes, we would. We would need to see positive ratings for their leaders. And at the minute, as I say, is a net negative satisfaction rating. So there's quite a bit of work. And they would need to be getting that on a regular basis. Rather than a sort of one hit. The other challenge, of course, for the Conservative Party is if Boris Johnson was to go at some point between now and when a general election happens, who is the natural successor? And the general public cannot pick from the lineup at the minute. Right. It's a very much, they either don't have an opinion or they don't have great confidence in any of the other potential people who could take on that role.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's interesting, but it's dire, isn't it, really? I mean, it's a terrible state of affairs when you can't think of anyone else.
Yet.
Oh.
Yet. We might start to
you
see...
just hope that somebody will blossom up.
Yeah. It might be the sort of the David Cameron approach again, where he sort of came from nowhere, didn't he? So perhaps we'll see something like that. Kelly, really good to see you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me.
There has to be talent bubbling under, doesn't there?
There must be.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally we find ourselves interviewing somebody and we turn to each other afterwards and say, he's one to watch. Yeah.
They're good. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's sometimes it's about their persona as much as anything else. I tell you who is impressive when you see it on TV. Not necessarily very impressive, I hate to say it, but Lisa Nandy in the Labour Party.
When you meet her in real life,
when you meet her in real life, she's quite an operator. Actually, I've got.
Yeah, on telly she does come over a bit doomy and gloomy. But that's because I suppose if you're in opposition, you're always criticising, aren't you? Yeah, I suppose, and not being very positive.
But she might be someone to watch in the Labour Party movement. Because, I mean, let's be honest, whatever your political preferences, you need a strong government and you also need a strong opposition because that's how we get the best out of everything.
Strong opposition breeds a strong government, I would have thought, anyway. Well, the Prime Minister has urged his ministers now to do everything in their power to ensure the release of those 2 British men sentenced to death in the separatist region of Donetsk.
Yeah, Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner were found guilty of mercenary activities and committing actions aimed at seizing power and overthrowing the constitutional order of the DPR.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's foreign minister says they will work with Britain to ensure the release of the 2 British men. But how is that going to work? Let's speak to Frank Furedi, who's an author and academic and often joins us. Good morning there, Frank. Hello. What do you think should happen next? How is this going to play out, given that diplomacy clearly isn't going to impress the Kremlin? And so what will?
Well, I think we need a bit more clarity about what Putin wants, because they're using these 2 prisoners as a propaganda coup, as a way of making a statement that, look how successful we are. We caught these mercenaries. We're doing extremely well. They can spin a story around these 2 prisoners that implies that there is far more intervention by Western mercenaries than the reality, because these are not mercenaries in any case. And I think what seems to be the case is that at some point Moscow will send signals suggesting that in order to get these 2 guys back, they'll need this and that concession. And the problem for us at the moment is that Britain hasn't got a relationship with the so-called Donetsk independent government. We only have a relationship with Moscow, who is actually the main actor behind the scenes. So in a sense, all that we can do is do what we can behind in the back channels and talk to Russian diplomats and find out from them, what's the score, what do they want to get out of this in order to begin to negotiate with them.
We've got to be very careful, haven't we? I mean, look, I know we're talking about the lives of 2 Brits here, and that has to be paramount in our thoughts. But also the government, presumably, is thinking we can't do anything that gives a legitimacy to the DPR, which is, an unrecognised regime.
I agree with you. I think this is very much like the problems we used to have when terrorists, for example, in Somalia, would catch British individuals when you have to negotiate behind the scenes. You don't want to legitimize an act of terror, nor do you want to legitimize this separatist government in the Donetsk region. And at the end of the day, there are some bigger geopolitical calculations that are in play, because essentially, when you look at the dynamics that's unfolding, we need to send a very clear message to Russia that we're not going to be, we're not prepared simply just to kind of accommodate to their every wish. We're not prepared to just simply respond in kind to their desire to, for example, to get some of their individuals back from Britain or from the Ukraine. So it is a very tricky situation, and I just hope that we put this tragedy, these two tragic individuals, into perspective, and understand that we cannot simply give way to what is in fact becoming more clearly an act of terrorism on the part of the Donetsk government.
Yeah, a very tricky situation indeed, isn't it? Frank Furedi, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Thanks.
I mean, it's so difficult, because if you know these two fellas, or if you've been in, you know, any sort of situation which is remotely similar, the last thing you want to hear is, well, it needs to be kept in perspective,
yes,
which is the wider perspective. It's not what you want to hear, but that's how, in a way, these things have to happen. Yeah. I mean, it's awful. It's an awful situation.
Well, and that's why they've done it, isn't it? That's why Putin's done what he's done.
Yeah.
Shall we bring you up to date with the rest of today's headlines? And Brazilian police have found apparently human remains in the Amazon River, where a British journalist and Indigenous expert disappeared. Dom Phillips and his travel companion Bruno Pereira were last seen on Sunday after visiting a remote part of the rainforest in São Rafael. Blood traces found on a boat of a fisherman who's been arrested as a suspect will now be tested.
From September, student loan interest rates are going to be capped at 7.3% for a year. That's to protect against inflation. The students would have faced a 12% rate at the end of summer, but the Department for Education has stepped in. They call it the largest scale reduction of student loan interest rates on record.
1 in 6 workers say they wouldn't be able to last a month financially if they lost their main source of income. The Building Societies Association says 1 in 4 people believe money worries affect their ability to do their job. And it said people won't be able to save money in the coming months because of the cost of living.
And the mum of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help hard-pressed families get medical cannabis. Charlotte Caldwell said dozens have to pay privately to get a prescription, when, of course, the cost of living is making that extremely difficult. She said those over 18 can access treatment, but younger children are being left behind. Now, if the doom and gloom of rising energy and food prices and higher inflation wasn't enough to flatten your mood, well, the nation's motorists are also facing that additional strain of record fuel prices, but, and it is a but because it might be a plus or a minus for you, second-hand car values are going through the roof, in some cases by up to 30%.
I suppose it's good news if you're selling.
If you're selling, great news, yeah.
If you need to buy a second-hand car, you will find that the prices of them are apparently going up. So what's the real impact on you in terms of your next purchase or next sale? Let's talk to car dealer Danny Kelly, who hopefully will be able to explain to us what's going on. Morning, Danny. What is going on?
Good morning. First, I need to apologise for my hay fever-riddled face. It's really hit me overnight. What's gone on over the last 18 months to 2 years, and to answer your question directly, is just an exponential, unheard of, unprecedented growth in the price of used cars. It's all to do with one of the basic tenets of capitalism. It's supply and demand. The demand's there, but the supply isn't there. And we're talking about new cars So the microchip, the semiconductor, the humble little microchip that you get in mobile phones and cars and laptops and whatever, there's a worldwide shortage of it. That has been exacerbated by COVID-19, and it's hit the new car market. And if you can't buy a new car, and you've got to turn to the used cars, and that's where I come in. And again, just the supply and demand, it's crazy. But car dealers aren't the only people who are winning. Customers are winning because their prices have shot through the roof too. It's unbelievable.
So, I mean, how much more are we talking? If you've got a car that you thought you could flog for 10 grand, what's it now going for?
Stephen, I've heard stories, mate, of Range Rover dealers calling up customers from 3 or 4 years ago, ringing them up saying, we would like to buy your Range Rover Evoque from you. Not only will we give you the 25 grand that you paid us, but we'll give you a couple of quid on top. It's that crazy. But it is starting to cool a little because the word is on the street that used cars are expensive. And the analogy I always give is that it's not like a house. Now, you could be in a house price market, a bubble, if you like, and the house of your dreams may be 50 or 60 grand overpriced because it's the market dictates it. And you can say to yourself, well, I'm going to live there for the next 35, 40 years, so sod it, I'll buy that house for 50 or 60 grand more than retail. But it doesn't matter. With cars, it's just a Ford Focus or it's just a BMW 5 Series. And I think the word is on the streets and people are now starting to cool down a little, particularly with the price of unleaded and diesel.
Yeah, you see, I'm in that very position myself. And what if somebody, our viewers are watching right now, and they're in the same position as me? I want to get rid of my car, but I'm watching at the moment, if I go online, I'm watching its value increase. So I don't know how long to hang on. How do I judge that?
Well, it depends. I'm sure not in your case, but it depends how skint you are. Now, your car price is only going to go up marginally, percentage-wise per month. So, you know, if you're short of cash, then just get rid of it. The used car market, it has plateaued, though. So if you want to sell it, then I'd just say, if you get a fair price, just sell it. Again, unless you're really skint, and I'm sure you're not.
Well, look, what's the best play then if you're in the market to buy another car, a second-hand car? Are you better off in terms of value for money now and looking where you might be in a couple of years? Are you better off buying a sort of a runabout of a Ford Focus or whatever it may be, or going towards a decent second-hand, more luxury model, a Mercedes or whatever?
Well, funnily enough, Stephen, I have a forecourt full of decent German executive-style cars that I think you would look fabulous behind the wheel with a little glint in your eye, cruising along the M40. I sold, talking about expensive cars, I sold a 27 grand M5 last week to a guy from Ireland. He part-exchanged a 2012 high-mileage BMW estate. I gave 5 grand for the estate. I'm going to sell it later on today at around about £6,600. The market is thriving. It really is. I would suggest that if you really like something, for example, for me, as long as it's got an automatic gearbox and air conditioning and a sunroof, I could be driving a Ford Fiesta. I really don't care. Or I could be driving a 30 grand M5. I would say just go for whatever you like. Treat yourself if you've got a couple of quid. The cost of living, I've also found that if you're not affected by the cost of living, then you're not going to be affected. You can buy a 25, 30 grand BMW M5. If you are affected by the cost of living, then you're going to keep your old car. You're maybe going to try and put it through an MOT, and you're going to say to yourselves, you know what, let's just keep the old Focus for another 12 months.
Yeah. I suppose people, in terms of the market, you may be selling the old luxury stuff there, Danny, but a lot of people are going to be looking at stuff that is as sort of fuel efficient as possible, which is essentially a smaller engine, isn't it?
Sure, Stephen. I sell an array of cars. The cheapest car I've got is 2 grand. I've got quite a few bits that are £2,500, and I've got some more expensive bits. But yes, you're right. People aren't soft. They know the price of cars are disproportionately high, and unless it's the bargain end of things, you know, if it's going to be like £2 grand, £2.5 grand, people will still buy the cars. I'm finding the stuff that's difficult to sell at the moment, the sort of 9, 10, 11 grand bits of kit, they're the cars that have definitely cooled down in price and desirability. And people are waiting. The bubble will burst, believe me. The bubble, it's like anything. A bubble will burst.
Bubbles always
people
burst,
don't want to be stuck in it. Of course they do it, yeah.
Look, you've got a lovely forecourt there, Danny, I'm sure. I'm quite tempted to come and have a look on my way home today. What would you see me in? What can you picture me in that you've got on your forecourt at the minute?
Okay, right. I have got the most unique BMW Z4 silver with red leather seats, a red dashboard, red door cards. This is bespoke. Red transmission coverage and a red gear stick. And I can see you. Roof down, baseball cap on. Baseball cap on, Steve, and flying back up to Cumbria in this beautiful weather.
Yeah, what reg is it and how much is it?
It's £8 grand. It's a 53 plate. It's £8,000. It's a
53 plate.
Put me off now. It's 19 years old, but the Z4s are going up in price. It's done 45,000 miles. You would look fabulous in it. You would radiate in it.
You're a good salesman.
You're a good salesman. I won't be buying it, but it sounds very nice. Danny.
I'm going to ask a question later. All right. What would you recommend for me? I want a smaller car now, and it's something that's quite fuel efficient, but I don't want it to say little old lady.
Well, first of all, you're not a little old lady. I think you look fabulous, Anne. And I'm not going to say, I'm 50 years old, I'm not going to say I grew up watching you on the telly either. You look beautiful. You haven't aged a day. So I would suggest for yourself, Anne, do you want 3 or 5 doors? You want... a classy woman like you probably wants an automatic gearbox because that's the common sense transmission, of course. I would recommend a little Mercedes A-Class 5-door, leather seats. It's got to have the sunroof, automatic transmission.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The A-Class are lovely. Get an A180, A250, something like that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
That's it, Stevie.
There you go. Danny, it's a joy to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. We'll be round with our checkbooks later.
Brilliant. Cash only.
Oh, all right.
No, you're going to take my old one in part exchange.
Good to see you.
Nothing about you is old, Anne. Nothing about you is old.
Oh, bless you. I wasn't fishing for the compliment there, but it's much appreciated.
He's smooth, isn't he?
What colour would I go for?
Ooh.
So I'd have to have cream leather seats because I just...
I'd go for like a grey.
Yeah, grey would be nice.
I like a grey.
Grey with cream leather seats.
Talking of colours and things, we're going to be having a look at a different take on London Fashion Week in a couple of minutes.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's not going to feel like summer today across Scotland and Northern Ireland, windy with showers, and that wind will be touching gale force around exposed western coasts of Scotland because of an area of low pressure, unseasonably deep for the time of year. That bringing tightly packed isobars across much of the north of the UK. A blustery day for many, but the strongest winds reaching the Western Isles, where gusts will be in excess of 50 miles an hour. That, in combination with the fact that we've got long spells of heavy rain into the Western Isles as well as the West Highlands, will make for an unpleasant day here. Showers also extending into Northern Ireland, southern and eastern Scotland. A few showers also for northern and western England, the Midlands and Wales, but fewer as you come further south, and the winds won't be as strong. So 23 Celsius for London, feeling pleasant here, feeling unpleasant where we've got 13 or 14 Celsius in the west of Scotland. We'll also see that persistent rain continue in the north of Scotland during Saturday evening. Overnight tonight, the rain pushes north, the low moves north and begins to fill, and so the winds will gradually start to come down. Still a breezy old night, but where we get clear spells in the south, with the winds easing here, perhaps single figures on the thermometer first thing tomorrow. A bright start then for much of England and Wales. You wouldn't rule out the odd shower for western parts of England, the north of England and Wales during tomorrow, but it's actually plenty of fine and bright weather, and with lighter winds, a more pleasant day on the whole. Scotland and Northern Ireland also fewer spells of persistent rain, but quite a few showers continuing, and on the cool side, 14 to 16 Celsius in Scotland and Northern Ireland. I think high teens, perhaps low 20s for England and Wales, and with lighter winds here and some sunny spells, feeling fairly pleasant. Monday looks generally fine across the UK, with lighter winds and fewer showers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 8:29. You're watching and listening
low
to
here,
Breakfast.
aren't I?
Oh, are you? Oh.
I'm going up higher.
You're definitely not a little old lady, as Danny was telling you.
Oh, thank you.
That's
It's my
fine.
biggest fear is becoming a little old
You
lady.
never will. Give over. Glamorous, ladies and gents. She's very glamorous. We're on your TV and on your radio, so you can just guess how glamorous she is if you're listening to us this morning.
Thank you. Fashion label Unhidden has been all over the press in recent weeks as it gears up to launch its latest collection at London Fashion Week.
Yeah, the label was founded by Victoria Jenkins, who became disabled in her 20s. She's with us this morning, along with Catherine, one of her models. Kat, we should say. Catherine's a Sunday name.
Morning. It's a Saturday.
Morning to you both. It's good to see you. Why did you want Victoria to really address the issue of fashion for people with a disability?
Well, I think because there's 1 in 5 people in the UK has a disability, and that it's not a niche market, but some people, like myself or like Kat, overnight might be unable to wear their clothes. And then where do they go and shop?
Why? I mean, this seems like a simplistic question, but a lot of people watching will say, OK, why do you need special clothes? Or what's wrong? What are the difficulties you immediately face with ordinary clothes?
So it's a couple of things. Some of it is just access, how you get into it. And then some of it is a dignity. Like if you've got, as Kat does, a stoma, that this dress has an opening, so she can access that without lifting her whole dress up. So, you know, instead of having to lift your skirt up or expose yourself, you don't have to. And the shirts have openings in the arms. So, for the 17 million cancer patients receiving treatment, they haven't got to take their whole shirt off. They can just open.
When you use the numbers like that, you realise how big a part of the market it is.
It's huge.
And why it's never been thought of before or catered for.
I think a lot of it is because, disability and fashion, how often do you hear that in the same sentence?
Yeah, not a lot.
And it starts with representation. It was Lloyds Bank Group did a study on representation in advertising, and disability is shown 0.06% of the time. But there's 1 in 5 people. It's 14.1 million in the UK.
Yeah. Oh, it's not. Yeah. Look, Kat, in terms of what you've seen so far, the sort of different clothes you've been able to get your hands on, what difference does it make?
Comfort and dignity. So the fact that I can sit in my chair, clothes are designed to be walked in and stood up in, they're not designed to be sat in all the time. So to have trousers that actually fit you right for sitting all day or for accessing colostomies or catheters, it's wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, you think so many people just imagine that, just wear a tracksuit or something. And the tracksuit has become the uniform almost.
And
of a
I
disabled
think that's
person.
because the assumption is that we don't work.
Yeah.
And therefore that we don't challenge this or that we don't want or need it. But, you know, actually not being able to dress for a job interview is actually holding us back from going for job interviews.
Yeah.
And then you can't expect someone to go into work in a jogging, you know, in joggers and a tracksuit. It's just unreasonable, and it's another barrier.
See,
just because you're in, I was going to say, just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean you can't look glamorous or be really businesslike.
Exactly.
Or frankly, just
be an
however you want to
entrepreneur.
be.
And express yourself. Like how we dress is an extension of how we present ourselves to the world, and denying one in 5 people that, or 1 in 4 in the States, I just don't think it's right.
And I was just thinking of my friend Luke, who's got cerebral palsy, and so he's in a chair and quite laid back a lot of the time. It's getting clothes that will actually sort of fit that form factor without, you know, especially if you're in a chair a lot, Kat, you know,
it's really difficult.
Yeah.
Because you need your fabric in different places, but then if you have too much fabric, you get sore, it rubs, it's uncomfortable.
Or waistbands can feel tight, can't they?
Yeah, that's right.
Waistbands,
and you need the expansion area so that you are comfortable all the time.
And what about the idea of being able to say, right, I can actually look in my wardrobe today and pick something nice, pick something that's going to, you know, like everybody else does.
Exactly. It's a basic human right. You know, legally we have to get dressed to leave the house. So,
So,
you know, if we deny that to some people, you know, it's the mental impact as well is huge.
What have you brought?
So, well, I did bring an example. So these are the seated trousers that Kat was just referring to. So all of the trousers are actually elasticated at the back. But these have a wrapping, so you can feed a catheter or a tube through. And then because they're seated, they're actually longer at the back, so they don't cut in. They're shorter at the front. There's excess removed from behind the knee, and they're longer. So literally to stand up in them feels really weird because they're literally shaped to sit down.
But they're made for somebody who sits down.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the shirt, sorry, I'm going to make you hold this. Then this is one of the shirts with openings in the arm. And everything is like snap fastenings, no buttons. And I'm still working on
But
getting
actually
the
it
right
looks
size magnet.
quite trendy.
Exactly,
That's
yeah.
quite
You could just
a trend,
come,
isn't
you
it?
could just open it up, be a bit 90s with it.
Yeah. It's part of the problem in trying to launch this sort of product. It's part of the problem demand in that, so there's a lot of people with disabilities in the country, but there are a lot of different disabilities. And so, in a sense, each little bit is going to be a bit niche, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. I mean, this is why this collection is only 10 pieces, but, you know, with investment, hopefully, I'll be able to expand that. But I think the other thing is it's also, you know, this is a call out to high street retailers, because at the end of the day, the price point has to be accessible as well. And, you know, at the moment, I make everything to order, so it is more expensive. Because I'm trying to use an ethical supply chain as well, so everything's made from dead stock fabric, which would otherwise go to landfill. So I'm trying to do everything that I can, but obviously that does mean it's a cost. I haven't got.
Have you been able to get sponsors that will actually be able to cough up a bit on it?
Working on it,
because that must be difficult, but that will make the huge difference.
Yes, it will. Yeah, and being able to persuade people that there is value in it, and that it's not reinventing the wheel. Some of it is as simple as putting an opening in a sleeve.
Yeah,
it's really, really simple.
In terms of being a model, Kat.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess when you became disabled, I guess that was probably at the time something you didn't, you know, you probably never thought a career as a model was on the cards.
No, certainly not.
What's it like?
It's great because the clothes are so comfortable, and just to be able to represent the community and show that you can express yourself in the clothes that you wear, and you can be comfortable and fashionable. And
I bet you've had a few views and tips as well.
Oh, well, of course, yeah.
All the time.
She's being very modest. She does do adaptive design as well. She does bespoke adaptive design.
I do it, yes.
Adaptive design.
Yeah.
Is that's taking things and making them work for you?
Yeah, well, this
is so I design and make for the disabled community, so it will be measured to fit them and them alone. So
right. You're a very talented pair, I'll give you that.
You're doing a great job too, such an important job.
It is important, yeah. Victoria, Kat, thank you both very much indeed. It's been great to see you this morning.
Best of luck. Do stay with us. We've got lots more to come, including what's hot and what's not in the world of showbiz with Stephanie.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
every morning from 6 o'clock. We'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
.38 morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne on your TV, on your radio and online.
And it's time to go through the papers now. Joining us this morning, Ella Whelan and Kevin Schofield. And what are we starting with first? Kevin, hello. Gosh, the anniversary of Grenfell.
Yeah, 5 years.
5?
Incredibly.
I can't believe it.
And even more incredibly, in those 5 years, no one has been charged, no one's been convicted. The police have been investigating a range of offences, corporate manslaughter, gross negligence. Public inquiry was announced the day after it happened by Theresa May, who was Prime Minister at the time. That's been going on, hundreds of hours worth of testimony, millions of documents, and still nothing.
Well, I mean, the headline there in the Telegraph is, we know who the guilty are, but they remain free.
Yep, and that is, I mean, it's a great piece, actually, looking into speaking to victims' families who are just looking for answers, for justice, and, as I say, 5 years on, still no nearer to finding out.
What do we make of the fact, I know it's controversial, but the fact that it's still standing?
Well, there was a debate that was happening between people who were both relatives of those who tragically lost their life and former residents, of whether or not it should just be level to the ground and moved and, forgotten about, as in people, have some kind of grieving process which they can move on, or whether it should stand as a testament to remind people of what happened. And in the context of what Kevin's saying, that it still hasn't been resolved 5 years later, I mean, even some of the people who were living in Grenfell, who then, survived, were, put up in hotel accommodation weren't given houses, weren't given permanent housing for far too long. I mean, months and months, and some even years afterwards. And so then, in that context, moving on from it becomes impossible if you can't put your finger on who's to blame. I mean, the complicated factor is that there was a number of things that went wrong, from the implementing of the cladding to the failure within the council. And there was lots of different moving parts, but there has been a huge amount of kind of passing the buck and dishonesty in the discussion about it.
But there were very grand and glorious announcements at the time that there would be the inquiry, that things would get done, this must never happen again, and all the rest of it. And it seems to have gone quiet. In a way, the fact that the building is still there stands as testament to the fact that we haven't got enough done.
Yeah, but you see that time and again with other tragedies, that in the immediate aftermath, politically, there's huge pressure on the government, so they announce an inquiry, that kicks it into the long grass. The news agenda moves on, other things happen that people focus on, and, as I say, lo and behold, here we are 5 years on, and nothing has happened. And by their very nature, these inquiries do take an awful long time, so it's probably going to be years, by which time, families, members will have died, that sort of memory will just fade.
Just dissipates.
Absolutely, and there's less political pressure on the government. We've got a different Prime Minister. Who knows who the Prime Minister will be by the time the inquiry reports. And, yeah, if there's less pressure on the politicians, then they're not going to do anything about it. So, I mean, it's tragic.
For people watching it and listening at the moment who don't live around London, the building is still there. It's covered in scaffolding.
And it has a message.
It's got a big green heart on it. But it's still there. I wonder why. I was imagining it would be taken down floor by floor or something.
And replaced, like the Twin Towers, replaced
like a memorial sort of thing,
yeah. Perhaps, yeah.
Look, I'm just keeping my eye on the clock. So, Ella, can we have a look at food? This is in the eye this morning. We need to eat like a king, a prince and a pauper.
Well, it's two conflicting versions from two professors who are arguing for two different kinds of diets. And Professor Foster, who has got the headline, suggests that the best way to lose weight and to eat healthily is to pile it in at breakfast, and then before you go to bed, eat very little, because he says that the evidence shows that we store fat, later on in the day. But then there's somebody else, Tim Spector, who's Professor of Genetic Epidemiology at King's College London, is actually suggesting that the best way to do it is to fast. So you leave off your big breakfast until maybe 11 or 12. It's the thing that both of them have in common is suggesting that actually the way in which we eat in the modern world, lots of people eat late at night because of work or things like that, isn't actually conducive to our natural body clock, and that as much as you can, you should be loading it up in the early hours, because that's when you're burning the fat and using the calories. I mean, that's not practical for most people, but I think, we all know that when we reach for the toast at 11 o'clock at night, it's probably not going to do us any good.
I never want breakfast in the morning. I'm never hungry in the morning.
Oh, it's my favourite meal of the day.
But Tim Spector, the guy at King's College, says that the most important thing, at whatever time of day it is to have a very long period of fast during the day. So if you, for instance, eat supper and then go to bed and you don't eat your breakfast till 11-ish, you've had a very long period where you're not eating at all. And he says that's the most important thing.
Right. You're absolutely starving when you wake up in the morning.
Well, sometimes I only eat once a day, sometimes. But it doesn't seem to make any difference to me.
Well, they don't feed us here, and so you have to feed yourself about 11 o'clock on your way home or something. So I go through a very long period, actually, of fast. Yeah. So that's probably
We're being healthy. Can we have a look, Kevin, at the FT? Because this MP who's called, was it Blackpool and Birmingham, she said were god-awful.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a great story. This is Heather Wheeler, who's a Cabinet Office Minister, was at an event not covered very much other than by a trade journalist. And at the beginning of her speech, to sort of break the ice, she says, I was just at a conference in Blackpool or Birmingham, somewhere god-awful. And so this, yeah, exactly.
And she said this in her speech?
Well, it's a preamble. It wasn't written down, obviously. I thought it was written down. It'd be, sack your speechwriter if you think that's a good thing for a minister to say. But anyway, so this trade journalist tweets it, and obviously straight away gets a phone call from the Cabinet Office. She was just making a joke. Probably best not to report on this. It's not really much of a story. But the FT have picked it up. We followed it up at the HuffPost as well. And, yeah, I mean, she's had to apologise. What a gaffe. Especially,
but she said, hasn't she? Oh, yes, I didn't believe what I was saying.
Well, that, I mean, it's the thick of it.
That's not a good thing for a Tory MP to say anyway.
Well, especially when, the whole thing about Boris Johnson's government is levelling up, helping the North, and people are saying, well, the Labour are saying, obviously, the mask has slipped. This is what the Tories really think of the North. I mean, if you're being kind to her, you'd say it's an ill-judged joke. But I think it betrays maybe an attitude.
They laid that Emily Thornberry stay, didn't they?
Previously in the programme, when I was talking about all the holidays, one of the things the Express reported was that Blackpool was the most popular destination for people, still. So she really doesn't know what she's
don't insult Blackpool.
And also, how can you confuse Birmingham with Blackpool? I mean, they're very different.
Somewhere beginning with B,
yeah,
north.
Yeah, Blackpool needs a lot of investment, but there's a lot. I had a holiday up there end of last year. It was a weekend away. It was fantastic. A lot of fun. Look, we're out of time. Good to see you both this morning. Ella, Kevin, thank you.
Happy Saturday.
Thank you.
It's 8:46. Let's just run you through a couple of headlines. And Brazilian police have found what are apparently human remains in the Amazon River, where a British journalist and Indigenous expert disappeared. Dom Phillips and his travel companion, Bruno Pereira, were last seen on Sunday after visiting a remote part of the rainforest in São Rafael. Blood traces found on the boat of a fisherman who's been arrested as a suspect will now be tested.
From September, student loan interest rates will be capped at 7.3% for a year to protect against soaring inflation. Borrowers would have faced something like 12% by the end of the summer, but the Department for Education has stepped in, calling it the largest scale reduction of student loan interest rates on record.
1 in 6 of us say we wouldn't be able to last a month financially if we lost our main source of income. The Building Societies Association says 1 in 4 people think money worries affect their ability to do their job. It said people won't be able to save money in the coming months because of the cost of living squeeze.
And the mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help hard-pressed families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Caldwell said dozens have had to pay privately to get a prescription, at a time, of course, when the cost of living is soaring. She said anyone aged over 18 can access treatment, but younger children are being left behind.
Time for the showbiz this morning. Stephanie Tetch is
Good
here.
morning, Stephen and Anna. Thank you. These are my
they're
favourite.
fab.
I've got this big collection of earrings at home. I'm a bit like a
on the
Pat
radio,
Butcher.
she's got big tussly old green.
I love
beautiful
earrings. Earrings always make an outfit.
Well, I wouldn't know. Look, can we talk Justin Bieber? Because he's not very well, is he?
I'm sparing a thought for Justin this morning because last night he came out with a video and he says that at the moment he's got Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, which is a complication of shingles. So at the moment he's got facial paralysis on his right side of his face, and in the video you can see he can't move his right face at all. So it's forced him to cancel dates from his world tour. He was currently in a 7-leg, 130 dates, but he says as it stands he cannot perform.
Oh, let's just have a quick look at that. We've got a clip.
I wanted to update you guys on what's been going on. Obviously, as you can probably see from my face, I have this syndrome called Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, and it is from this.
Oh dear!
Half of his face isn't working
It
properly.
can. I mean, I know Ramsay-Hunt does. I mean, it clears up in about 80% of cases, but it can leave you with some form of deafness.
Can, and that's the scary part. And I've, even last night when I was reading about it, and people who've had it said sometimes their nerves don't fully come back on their face. So I'm hoping this isn't the case for Justin.
He said he's had trouble eating.
Yeah, he's had trouble eating, singing, hearing, the whole full lot. He's in no fit stage to perform. And it's been quite a tough time for Justin because his wife, Hailey Bieber, back in March, was hospitalised for a small blood clot on her brain. And so it's all sad all round. But we're wishing Justin a speedy recovery.
Yeah. Oh, what a shame. It looks a bit like sort of what did they call it? Bell's palsy.
But trying to find out what was the difference between the two.
You can see in this case why he posted that video, because he wanted to explain to his fans because he's got to cancel these dates.
And
they can see for themselves that there's this genuine reason.
And I think as well he wanted to, highlight what the condition is as well, because I hadn't heard of it. Like I know of Bell's palsy, but I hadn't heard of this.
I know shingles causes terrible.
Yeah.
Well, let's hope it will be temporary for him.
Yeah, let's hope so. Should we talk marriage?
Yeah, yes. Oh, you got a ring for me, Stephen. Yesterday we were talking about Britney finally getting married to her fiancé Sam Asghari, but now we've had some pictures and videos from the affair, and it was quite a star-studded affair. She had Madonna there, she had Selena Gomez there, Drew Barrymore, and it was quite a...
their house is like a castle.
It was
and
quite
look
a
at
Cinderella.
The train of her dress was longer than Princess Diana's.
I know, she was wearing a Versace gown, and Donatella Versace was there as well. So it was a full-on nice affair, and Madonna and Britney got a bit too close. They recreated that kiss. The kiss that they did. So I don't know how Britney's husband was feeling about that.
Well, I know, because last time she did it in front of Justin Bieber, who she just split up from.
So there we go. There is the kiss.
Anything for a good Instagram picture.
But Britney was honest, and she said she did have a panic attack attack. She said
Oh,
before
really?
the ceremony she was feeling quite nervous, and the actual reality of her marrying her fiancé kind of hit her, knocked her for 10. But
Oh, you think she'll be used to it now?
I must
Third
say, she's
time
looking,
lucky.
given all she's been through, she's looking good, isn't she?
She is, because I think everyone's been worried about Britney. Is she okay? And I think she just needs moments like this where she can celebrate her life, because a part of her conservatorship was that she wasn't allowed to get married or have babies, and unfortunately she had a miscarriage a bit earlier on this
What's
year.
he like? Is he going to be the rock she needs?
I don't know, Anne. There's something, for me personally, I think there's something a bit
Okay, we'll wait and see.
about
I seem
him.
to know a lot about it. Is he a model or something?
No, he's a fitness instructor. But they've been together for a while, 5 years, so maybe they can stand the test of time.
Well, let's hope so.
Well, we believe
Well,
in
maybe
love,
a
don't
fitness
we?
instructor is what she needs. Somebody who can create some sort of a...
Well, she looks amazing.
She does look very,
These
very good.
strong, rock-hard abs.
There we go. Can we talk cake? Away from the fitness to the cake, please.
I am so in the mood for cake now.
okay.
So last night, because everyone's been talking about who done the cake for Lilibet's first birthday.
This is Harry and Meghan's child.
Yep. So now we've had the confirmation that it was Claire Patak who made it from Violet Cakes, and she made this awesome cake, which is a 2-tier Amalfi lemon and elderflower fillings with strawberry buttercream on it.
Yeah, but if I were a 1-year-old, I'd say, where is my Colin the Caterpillar cake?
I know. I was thinking this is a bit too much lavish of a cake for a 1-year-old.
This is for the
a
parents,
garden
isn't it?
party, yeah, definitely. They probably took some back with them to America. All in all, it was £244, which is quite decent, I think, for a royal cake.
Yeah. Well, if you're buying a wedding cake, then, then it's that sort of price or more, isn't it?
What cake did you have?
We had poppy and lemon, poppy seed and lemon, white on one layer. Then it was white chocolate and raspberry, and then it was...
Where's our slice, then?
Then it was...
You had that many slices.
Then it was
layers.
Biscoff on the top.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that was about...
Have you kept a slice? Is there...
We've got the Biscoff still. The rest of it got eaten.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, that's lovely.
So that's in the freezer waiting for Christmas.
Oh.
But that was about 350, I think.
OK, that's good.
It's a lot of money for a cake, isn't it?
No.
You know what weddings are like.
Well, yes, weddings. No,
Cakes are always the
special day, it's a
talking
special
point.
day.
Yeah, it's all about the cake.
Well, that's why I just think that cake for Harry and Meghan, for those of you listening on the radio, it was just a really adult...
It was an adult cake.
It is.
An adult cake.
And, you know, she's not going to remember this at all, but I thought they would have got a more childlike. But it's still very elaborate, but definitely is for the adults. And it wasn't even that big of a party.
No.
No. No, actually, talking about big parties, the whole Britney thing, I thought it was meant to be an intimate wedding that she was having.
Well, it does seem like it was an intimate wedding. It seems like she just had more celebrity friends there. Don't know how friendly they are, but, you know...
I love the name of the area that they're living in, Thousand Oaks.
I know.
Is that what it is?
Isn't it? In California, Thousand Oaks.
Oh. Yeah.
If it really is 1,000, I'd want to be out counting it.
Well,
do we think that when it comes to celebrities and all these celebrity friends, are they real? You've been a celebrity for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you think, if you have celebrity friends, are they real friends?
No,
or are
I
they
tell you what, no, because if you read Britney Spears' post on Instagram, she doesn't call Madonna my friend Madonna or Mad or something. She calls her at Madonna, you know, and gives her and she said she was surprised that some of them turned up. She didn't know them very well.
Well, because I think celebrities just like use
out a list.
Yeah, and they just like getting the shot from the marriages to say I was there, but you know, through Britney's battles, I hardly saw any of these people really speaking
Paris
up for
Hilton
her.
was there.
Yeah,
Is that really a friend, or is
Paris
that
was like pre-Britney toxic, you know, when they were back in their heyday. So. Showbiz friends. There's no friends like showbiz friends.
You have to have a smattering of them, don't you?
Do you?
Yeah.
I suppose. I've only really got you.
Oh, well, I'll come.
As showbiz.
Next party.
Yeah, you're a showbiz friend too, Stephen.
Oh, I'm not showbiz. I ain't showbiz, but you two are, that's for sure. Very
well,
glam.
we'll teach you.
Oh, there you go. Stephanie, thank you. We'll catch you in the next hour. Stay with us, though. We've got lots more to come, including NASA joining the hunt for UFOs.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's not going to feel like summer today across Scotland and Northern Ireland, windy with showers, and that wind will be touching gale force around exposed western coasts of Scotland because of an area of low pressure, unseasonably deep for the time of year. that bringing tightly packed isobars across much of the north of the UK. A blustery day for many, but the strongest winds reaching the Western Isles, where gusts will be in excess of 50 miles an hour. That, in combination with the fact that we've got long spells of heavy rain into the Western Isles as well as the West Highlands, will make for an unpleasant day here. Showers also extending into Northern Ireland, southern and eastern Scotland. A few showers also for northern and western England, the Midlands and Wales, but fewer as you come further south, and the winds won't be as strong. So 23 Celsius for London, feeling pleasant here, feeling unpleasant where we've got 13 or 14 Celsius in the west of Scotland. We'll also see that persistent rain continue in the north of Scotland during Saturday evening. Overnight tonight, the rain pushes north, the low moves north and begins to fill, and so the winds will gradually start to come down. Still a breezy old night, but where we get clear spells in the south, with the winds easing here, perhaps single figures on the thermometer first thing tomorrow. A bright start then for much of England and Wales. You wouldn't rule out the odd shower for western parts of England, the north of England and Wales during tomorrow, but it's actually plenty of fine and bright weather, and with lighter winds, a more pleasant day on the whole. Scotland and Northern Ireland also fewer spells of persistent rain, but quite a few showers continuing, and on the cool side, 14 to 16 Celsius in Scotland and Northern Ireland. I think high teens, perhaps low 20s for England and Wales, and with lighter winds here and some sunny spells, feeling fairly pleasant. Monday looks generally fine across the UK, with lighter winds and fewer showers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Morning to you, 9 o'clock on Saturday the 11th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Stephen and Anne.
And we're live, as you know, across the whole of the UK on both your TV and your radio. Here's what we're going to be discussing through the morning.
Prince Charles has privately criticised the government's plan to deport migrants to Rwanda, calling the practice appalling. It comes as the High Court ruled that the first batch of migrants could be deported sometime next week.
Boris Johnson has ordered his ministers to do everything in their power to ensure the release of the 2 British men sentenced to death in the separatist region of Donetsk. What will this mean, though, for the war in Ukraine and Britain's involvement?
And with Love Island coming under fire, we're asking, when does an age gap in a relationship become appropriate or inappropriate? We'll be hearing from a psychologist much later on. I don't know why we're showing that lady there particularly. Was she getting engaged to a young man or something?
I don't know. That's a bit of a mystery. If you're listening on the radio, you missed nothing there, I think.
That's one way of putting it.
I think we got the wrong picture to go with the wrong words.
Maybe.
And as ever, anyway, you can join in any of our discussions or send us your messages by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews.
And you can subscribe, of course, for free to the GB News channel on YouTube to get all the very latest on the big stories that we're talking about today. So the PM has told ministers to do everything in their power to ensure the release of 2 British men sentenced to death in the separatist region of Donetsk.
Yes, they're Aidan Aslin and Sean Pinner, and they were found guilty of mercenary activities and committing actions aimed at seizing power and overthrowing the constitutional order of the DPR.
Well, meanwhile, Ukraine's foreign minister says they're going to work with Britain to ensure the release of the 2 British men. Let's talk to retired British officer in charge of rebuilding Iraq. Major General Tim Cross. We've got a little bit of feedback. Hopefully this is going to work. Tim, good to see you this morning. Look, what, if anything, can actually be done about this?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you and we can see you well too.
Okay, great. Well, the answer is relatively limited, I'm afraid, but in terms of a unilateral action, if you like. But we need to be clear, let's start at the beginning. We need to be clear these guys are not mercenaries. We can talk about the distinction if that's helpful a bit later. But these guys lived in Ukraine. They joined the Ukrainian military. They took an oath to defend Ukraine. They're just like a young soldier, a young lad or lady in this country joining the British Army and then being deployed on an operation somewhere around the world. So these are not mercenaries. They are part of the Ukrainian military. They therefore needed to be treated as prisoners of war. They were taken prisoner by the Russians, and it is the Russians who need to look after them. They can't slope shoulders on passing these 2 guys over to this state, one of the eastern states, as you say, in the Donbass, and leave it to them to put them on trial. And the trial, of course, is a pretty much a show trial. Charging with treason is an easy out, if you like. It isn't. I don't think the death penalty that's been awarded will happen, but there's no doubt that it's now being used as a political tool. And it will, I'm sure, become part of the negotiations for prisoner exchange and so on. So probably they're going to be okay, but it's going to be a pretty long, drawn-out process, I suspect.
If we do negotiate in any way, doesn't that actually put us in the position of recognising a sham state and sham charges?
Yes, it does. It does, and it's why I make the distinction between Russia, who took these guys as prisoners. I mean, I was deployed on a number of operations around the world, including the first Iraq War, when we took shed loads of prisoners, frankly. And our responsibility as we took them prisoner was to take them out of the battle space, take them out of danger, and make sure they received medical support and were fed well and looked after properly. They were moved back to prisoners of war camps where they were looked after by a British battalion, in this case, who kept them as prisoners. Much the same as my father-in-law was a prisoner of war during World War II and was kept in a German prisoner of war camp. And then the Swiss authorities and the Red Cross get involved to help look after people properly, etc. There's well-trodden paths in terms of how we look after prisoners of war under the Geneva Conventions. And that is a Russian responsibility. They can't just pass these guys to an illegal state or a state that's not recognized under international law. So there's absolutely no doubt in my mind at all that we can't recognize these 2 states. We have to deal with this through the Russian authorities.
OK, look, Tim Cross, Major General, we've got to leave it there because I know you're dashing off to something else. So thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning.
Absolutely.
Look, loads of you getting in touch, as always. I mean, you always do. We absolutely love it. We were talking strikes a little bit earlier on because there are rail strikes that are due to take place. Nadeem Zahawi, the Education Secretary, said doesn't want schools to shut down and go back to homeschooling. Saying, do really many children use the train to get to school?
Well, I did every single day of my school life, there and back by train.
Oh, right. Oh, well, there you go. on that, in terms of strike action, John says, I was a union rep for 42 years. We went on strike for 6 weeks in the 1970s. Going on strike does not work. You never get the lost earnings back. Through negotiation, we ended up with far higher wages and better conditions.
That's interesting, coming from somebody who did strike. Alan says, Stephen says there can't be many kids go to school on a train. My train to work in Bradford is packed with school kids. Depends where you live, doesn't it?
I guess it does. Chris in Carshalton says hundreds of thousands of children travel to school across London every day by train and tube. These cruel strikes occur right in the middle of A-level exams. I'm taking a day off work just to ensure my daughter makes her exam.
Yeah, that's interesting, because Nadim Zahawi was saying, wasn't he, that you mustn't let the strike be an excuse to just go back to remote working. But what else can you do if you live miles and miles away from where you go to school? Jackie says, the pay and conditions of railway workers has nothing to do with me. I can't affect it, yet I may be affected by their behaviour. It's beyond selfish.
Yeah, up in Livingston, Gary says, if most workers went on strike for more money, it would cause businesses to fold. I'd replace all workers going on strike. If that was put across to the £60,000 a year train drivers, they'd stay, as they won't get that elsewhere.
Michael says, I don't condemn the railway staff striking. The truth is, the government, which is supposed to be running the country, need to look outside their bubble. And then Robert says, 3 days off school because of rail strikes isn't going to ruin a child's education. They've just had over a year of homeschooling due to government lockdowns. But isn't that the point? I don't think they can... Can we take any more?
Yeah.
You're dealing already with kids sitting their A-levels who've already gone through 2 years of probably more remote learning than face-to-face learning. And that's not what we believe in, is it?
I don't know, children have changed, though, because I would have liked homeschooling,
Well,
I guess. Not to have to go...
I'd have been lazier than I was when I went to school.
Yeah, we had... when I was at secondary school, it's when there was a load of NUT strikes. Do you remember all those back in the late 80s? And sometimes you just get to school and they were dishing out slips to say you can go home again.
No!
Yeah.
Oh.
It was great, and I'd sort of walked 3 miles to school, picked up the slip, walked 3 miles back. So that was, I thought that was pretty good, really. But we did... Of course, there was no remote working. You didn't do any homework.
There was no internet. You didn't...
You just went home.
Video call people in those days.
No, can you imagine? It was like something off Star Trek, all that.
Yeah, oh, it was. It was something you thought would never happen, the idea of a video phone.
Yeah.
Or just being able to talk to anyone, anywhere in the world, as we are now, talking live to you. You just had no idea that would ever happen. We've also been talking since 6 o'clock this morning about your sleeping habits, because we were talking to a sleep expert who reckoned that if you're a couple, it is far healthier for both of you to sleep in the same bed together. You get a better form of sleep. It's much, much better for you.
And a bit of cuddling.
And a bit of cuddling. What Cindy says, she's cuddled by her 16-year-old cat. She says she's worse than any toddler, insists on sleeping on our bed, often at head height. We both wake up with achy limbs as we try to sleep round her.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Timmy wakes me up at 3 o'clock every morning. Every morning.
Not mornings when you are working.
No, every morning. And he claws, and which is an affectionate sign. But all that...
3 o'clock in the morning, it's
and
not from anyone.
The claws are like pins. It's just like, oh, for heaven's sakes, Timmy. Sometimes the only way to calm him down is to lift the duvet up, and he'll go under the duvet and then settle.
Oh, not under the duvet?
Yeah.
That's too intimate, I think.
I don't know what to make of Kenneth this morning.
Go on.
He says, my wife and I have been married for 36 years, together for 40. We still sleep in the same bedroom and it's still romantic. Well, that's good. Then he says, she sits on her side of the bed and puts on her mask. I sit on my side of the bed and put on my full-face night mask. And then we say goodnight to each other.
A full-face night mask?
I don't know if you're joking or not, Ken.
I've seen those.
Really?
Yeah, you make you look like an alien because you put it all over. I would have thought
what's
incredibly
that for?
claustrophobic. You put it all over and it's got eye holes and it's obviously got a hole for your mouth and nose so you can breathe. Yeah, it's meant to be incredibly good for you. I think they're made of silk on the inside and it's meant to be good for your skin. But fancy sleeping next to somebody wearing one.
I don't know.
I'd wake up thinking I was in bed with an alien.
I tell you what, both my dad and my brother are like twins. You know, they're like twins. So they both like to read in bed. My sister-in-law's tearing her hair out. And so they both got night lights. Your straps on. So they get into bed and they put on little headlamps.
Well,
and sit in bed reading their book.
Side lamp.
Well, don't ask me, Anne.
That's weird.
Do not ask me. So both my father and my brother sit there with little headlamps on in bed.
Well, I suppose you can go under the duvet, read under the duvet.
Honestly, they're like a pair of kids, those two. They are like teenagers.
But you have to sort out your seating. I mean, everybody to their own, I guess, because Karen says, we've been married 35 years. I'm a bad sleeper. He sleeps like a log. I'm menopausal and hate bedding, and due to medical conditions, like a firm mattress. He likes loads of bedding and a soft mattress.
Oh.
We solved our differences by buying a 6-foot bed frame, 2 3-foot mattresses, one hard, one soft, and then I placed a mattress topper over both of them to make it look like one bed, and we have our own duvet and sheets. It's worked an absolute treat.
Yeah, that's the way. Split the double into
bed.
2.
Yeah. And have 2 different mattresses. That's quite good.
Yeah, what a good idea.
To each their own. I mean, you just have to figure out what suits you, I guess, don't you?
Yes, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Very resourceful, our viewers.
12 minutes past 9, the headlines for you. And Prince Charles has reportedly described the government's policy of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing as appalling. The Times says he made the comments in private conversations. Clarence House insists he is still politically neutral. About 31 migrants are due on the first flight on Tuesday. However, a judge has granted permission to appeal that decision, which was heard yesterday. That could be heard on Monday.
A man has been arrested in Kent on suspicion of murder after a teenage boy was stabbed to death at his home in Manchester. The 15-year-old's mother was also injured in the attack in Miles Platting on Thursday night. Greater Manchester Police, who called the incident ferocious, said the 44-year-old suspect is believed to be known to the victims.
Brazilian police have found what are apparently human remains in the Amazon, where a British journalist and an expert there disappeared. Dom Phillips and Bruno Pereira were last seen on Sunday after visiting a remote part of the rainforest in São Rafael. Blood traces have been found on a boat of a fisherman. He's been arrested, and those blood traces will now be tested.
1 in 6 workers say they wouldn't be able to last a month financially if they lost their main source of income. The Building Societies Association says 1 in 4 people believe money worries affect their ability to do their job. And it said people won't be able to save money in the coming months because, of course, of the cost of living squeeze.
The mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help hard-pressed families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Coldwell said dozens have to pay privately, which is very difficult, especially at the moment. Apparently, she says those over 18 can access treatment, but younger children are left behind.
Well, we've been talking housing and the housing crisis for days and days. So here's another one for you. The Ministry of Defence apparently owns just under 10,000 houses in the UK that are right now empty and falling into disrepair. Many of those houses are in communities that say their neighbourhoods are turning into an absolute wasteland.
Well, our South West of England reporter Jeff Moody went to Devizes in Wiltshire to see the effect that these so-called MOD ghost towns are having on the people who live there.
A quiet street in Devizes. Too quiet. Children should be playing here. The hum of mowers, the buzz of family life, silent and forgotten. And not just on this road. There are 1,300 empty houses in Wiltshire alone, 9,000 in the UK. Wiltshire Council says it would love to buy them.
I don't have a housing crisis in Wiltshire, but I've definitely got a shortage. I'm having to build on greenfields all over the county to meet government housing targets. Yet there are houses here sitting empty that, as far as those housing targets go, simply don't exist because they're MOD housing.
And they're crumbling. Storm damage lies unrepaired. The post stacks up. The gardens unkempt and unloved. The MOD rents them from a private company to the tune of £500,000 a year, and that's just in Wiltshire.
I don't think they actually know what to do with them. And it makes me feel as if they've just deserted the place. And I mean, we live across from it, and I mean, it used to be lovely here. There was kids running about, and families and whatnot. And now it's just left to rot.
Rotting too the sense of community.
There isn't a community. There isn't a community. All the houses are empty. To look out onto something that is so unkempt and derelict, really, is not very nice. Devalues our properties as well.
But it's not just about providing housing for local people. Wiltshire Council approached the MOD and asked them if they could use these houses for Afghan refugees and more recently for Ukrainian refugees. The answer to both requests was no.
We've approached, certainly initially with the Afghan refugees. I thought it was particularly appropriate where the Afghan refugees were coming over here because their lives were literally at risk because they've been helping our troops. And again, they were looking at short-term lets, but I'm afraid the MOD weren't willing to help there.
The Ministry of Defence told GB News, "We manage around 17,000 service family moves every year and therefore need to retain vacant homes across the UK. We are actively working to reduce the number of surplus properties and by autumn 2023 aim to have just 10% of homes empty to facilitate essential maintenance. But with the cost of living crisis in full swing and a housing shortage on its way, many are arguing 10% is still way too high." Jeff Moody, GB News.
Well, on the housing issue, Joanna's been in touch and says there are more than 700,000 properties in England that are empty or derelict, which need to be brought back into use. Any new building should only be on brownfield sites, and that I absolutely agree with.
Absolutely, and also doing them up, saving them from dereliction and actually making them habitable again would provide jobs, wouldn't it?
Provide jobs, and presumably would be cheaper than building from scratch.
Yeah.
Because it's the land that's very expensive.
Isn't that the sort of joined-up thinking that you would expect the government to be able to come up with? It would provide jobs, it would be cheaper than completely new building, and it would actually then provide housing for people too. And presumably an awful lot cheaper than just throwing money at building new.
You'd think so.
If that's right, that there are 700,000, and I can believe it, 700,000 properties that are empty or derelict now.
Derek says, and actually he's not the only one saying this, how about housing our own people first before anybody else? And I do think there is an argument for that. You know, I know we've got to help other people. I think that's quite right that we help other people. But then I always just, when you see people on the streets and things here, and we know a lot of young people really struggling, a lot of young men actually, they're in very bad positions at the moment. You think, what do you do? More needs to be done. Sean in Leicester says, we had a house nearby that took the council 30 years to bring back on the market. The owners had left to go abroad 35 years ago. I mean, why was that left?
Astonishing, isn't it?
Scary.
We're also looking forward next week to the 40th anniversary of the Falklands conflict. And that's got a lot of memories going, I think, for people, because I certainly remember the sending the fleet off, and then the terrible news that came in over the next few weeks and months, and then the returning triumphant fleet. And there were amazing magic moments there. Derek says, this is interesting, he says, my father worked for a civilian company with a government contract to repair military radios. He'd just finished repairing and was reinstalling the transmitter in a submarine when it set sail for the Falklands with him on board. They dropped him off a day later to a small boat heading back to England. I bet he was relieved.
Wow. But that was quite an adventure. Look, we'll run through more views for you in just a couple of minutes. Got loads of them to get through, which is great. But don't go anywhere, because we've got lots more to come, including forgetting the space race, sort of, because NASA is now looking for UFOs.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's not going to feel like summer today across Scotland and Northern Ireland, windy with showers, and that wind will be touching gale force around exposed western coasts of Scotland because of an area of low pressure, unseasonably deep for the time of year. That bringing tightly packed isobars across much of the north of the UK. A blustery day for many, but the strongest winds reaching the Western Isles, where gusts will be in excess of 50 miles an hour. That, in combination with the fact that we've got long spells of heavy rain into the Western Isles as well as the West Highlands, will make for an unpleasant day here. Showers also extending into Northern Ireland, southern and eastern Scotland. A few showers also for northern and western England, the Midlands and Wales, but fewer as you come further south, and the winds won't be as strong. So 23 Celsius for London, feeling pleasant here. feeling unpleasant, where we've got 13 or 14 Celsius in the west of Scotland. We'll also see that persistent rain continue in the north of Scotland during Saturday evening. Overnight tonight, the rain pushes north, the low moves north and begins to fill, and so the winds will gradually start to come down. Still a breezy old night, but where we get clear spells in the south, with the winds easing here, perhaps single figures on the thermometer first thing tomorrow. A bright start then for much of England and Wales. You wouldn't rule out the odd shower for western parts of England, the north of England and Wales during tomorrow, but it's actually plenty of fine and bright weather, and with lighter winds, a more pleasant day on the whole. Scotland and Northern Ireland also fewer spells of persistent rain, but quite a few showers continuing, and on the cool side, 14 to 16 Celsius in Scotland and Northern Ireland. I think high teens, perhaps low 20s for England and Wales, and with lighter winds here and some sunny spells, feeling fairly pleasant. Monday looks generally fine across the UK, with lighter winds and fewer showers.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
On radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Defence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
(9:24) morning to you. This is Breakfast with Stephen and Anne.
I was talking about the fact that next week it's the 40th anniversary of the Falklands War, the liberation of the Falkland Islands. And next week, GB News is going to talk about it. And we've been given access to previously unseen images of the conflict.
Yeah, they were taken at the time by a young Falklands photojournalist. And now they've gone on display at a special exhibition in Chatham Dockyard.
You can see an extended feature on these powerful images on GB News digital platforms right now, but here is a sneak peek.
The surrender in full swing here. I mean, you can see all the detritus around the streets as well.
These Argentines are being rounded up by British troops. You can see, I think, Paras or Marines doing their best to round them up and at the same time getting these men to clear up a little bit. But the mess was unspeakable. This was one of our general stores here, which had been torched and was gone, but the smoke was still lingering. And when I look at these, I can almost still smell them. It was just a complete scene out of hell.
Yeah, we're going to bring you live coverage throughout a special day of Falklands commemoration next Tuesday It is going to be, it's quite something. I think it's 40 years ago, actually.
I remember it so well. Gerald has emailed in. Hi, Gerald. He says, when our troops returned from the Falklands War in 1982, the railway workers were on strike, which made it very difficult for our lads to get home, where loved ones were waiting for them. Much distress. What I learned then was rail workers care about no one except themselves. So what's changed? Gosh, 40 years on.
Now, let's change tack slightly, because do you believe in UFOs, unidentified flying objects, aliens, those little green men?
Or just something that you can't explain? Well, NASA has announced it's going to begin a study of UFOs. It's a subject that, of course, fascinates everybody, frankly, as part of a new push towards what they call high-risk, high-impact science.
Let's talk to space expert Andrew Lound. Morning to you, Andrew. So, look, what exactly will they be looking at here?
Good morning. Well, yes, this is quite interesting because this is often seen as fringe science. Immediately you say UFO, and immediately you're always wondering that you're going to have one of these things flying around over your head. But it's an object that's in the sky that's unidentified. And they've actually been relabeled UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, which is probably a better term in many respects, because many things that people apparently are seeing are probably natural phenomena which are badly observed or just unknown at this moment in time. And NASA really want to set up a panel because I want to get away from this sort of fringe concept of what UFOs are, aliens visiting us, and actually have a look at the data sets and find out exactly what people are observing, because people have been observing things flying in the sky for many, many, many decades. In fact, in the Second World War, they were known as Foo Fighters, and all through civilians have seen them as well. And so we really want to get a good handle on the science of it, really, because there's that much fringe going on at the moment. Everybody's saying that they're aliens, they're visitors, they're pan-dimensional beings. Let's get rid of all that nonsense now and let's start having a look at the real science.
Oh, but is that, forgive me, but is that all nonsense? I mean, because what you do get is people who've been up, on the ISS, on the space shuttle, who've come back down and have seen things up there that they say not only they don't know what they are, but they're things that have gone from rapidly changing direction and rapidly changing speed, which it can't be a natural phenomenon.
Oh, yes, you've been watching these lovely programmes, haven't you, again? No, I mean, lots of those particles that you see there are quite clearly ice particles or small particles changing direction as thrusters are being fired. Quite clear what those actually are. But, of course, various media programmes tend to build these up because it really stirs up the excitement. Oh, look at this. This is aliens visiting us and are being fired at, look, by ground defences, when clearly they're not. You've got to get your perspective right and look at this, and that's where the real science has to come in for it, and that's really important. Otherwise you take a very strange view of it, and that's really important to get rid of that now and start looking at the real science of this, because we could be discovering something which is quite important and missing it. Ball lightning is a great example of this. Ball lightning was well documented through history, but because people said, oh no, people are a bit weird, they don't know what they're looking at, it was ignored until it was actually discovered that you are looking at plasma effects actually happening within the Earth. And we've got things, effects of lightning which move upwards into the sky called sprites, which come above thunderstorms. Again, another interesting aerial phenomena which people would have ignored if you hadn't applied the science to it. So there could be some good real science here coming out of this. And yes, I would love it to be extraterrestrials visiting us with spacecraft, but with all the images that we've got on this planet, there is absolutely zero evidence that you could put in front of a court of law to say that aliens are visiting us. And as one scientist said, 5% of the universe is what we've observed. 95% of it is unobserved. And this is a chance to start having a look at a tiny percentage of that now.
There are only a very few human beings who've been out of our Earth's gravity at all. Further than the ISS, the very few Apollo astronauts who went to the moon. And they all apparently did report seeing things they couldn't explain. I mean, we're not talking about little green men, but there was something they couldn't explain. And according to Buzz Aldrin, they were told to shut up about it, but they were taken seriously by NASA themselves. And isn't it interesting that NASA is now taking it seriously enough to say, all right, this is exciting science, let's look at it more closely?
Absolutely right, and we need to do that. One of the reasons, of course, they wanted to... To be fair, NASA were too busy trying to concentrate on keeping people alive going to and from the moon. They haven't time to get sidetracked, because one of the things we're going to be able to do now with Gateway going to the moon is having a look at these observed effects. I mean, they saw flashes on the surface of the moon, which were probably micrometeorite impacts. We're seeing glows on the horizon of the moon, which was actually taken by surveyor landers on the moon. And this appears to be dust reflecting light from the sun because of electrostatic effects of dust rising on the surface of the moon. Wonderful natural phenomena which hasn't been really studied properly before, and it's going to be important to study them. And I think one of the reasons NASA now needs to study these things is because if we're sending humans into space now on longer term, away, as you correctly say, away from the Earth towards the moon and eventually to Mars, there's a lot of phenomena out there we don't understand, and we need to understand it for the safety of the crews as well as for our general curiosity. But I mean, you go all the way back to John Glenn's first flight around the Earth when he saw what he called the fireflies going around the spacecraft. People were very wondering what on earth he'd seen. Again, it's a phenomenon that was observed. We couldn't go into details about it. It was the very early days. Now is perhaps a chance at learning something about what's going on out there. And now the astronauts will actually have a chance to now in detail, but at the time of Apollo they really had to concentrate on what they were doing. You couldn't afford to get sidetracked because of the nature of the missions.
Okay, Andrew, I'm not entirely with you on this, I've got to be honest, but it's good to talk you. It's good to talk to you this morning. No, I mean I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer in alien life on this, visiting this, as is Dr. Michael Saller, who's in the Star this morning. He says about 17 different races are directly interacting with humanity. They're trying to establish a fascist regime on Earth.
And you believe that?
No, not entirely. No,
good.
No, but I do think that we probably have been visited by something.
So?
Yeah, I do.
Isn't that just wishful thinking?
No.
Something we really disagree on now.
Yeah, no, I do.
No,
but
we
there
love
you
talking
go.
space.
We do love talking space. Look, don't go anywhere. We've got plenty more to come, including all the showbiz and all the sport for you.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV,
on radio, on digital.
Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices.
With honest and civilised conversation.
we're not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, the comedy panel show that's just like the news, in that the left fights the right and it doesn't really seem to matter who wins. We cover the big stories. It was in fact a troop of baboons and not angry vegans.
I like that.
And the really important stories.
Fat naked cow gets stuck in swimming pool.
It's a headline in a lot of local newspapers. Yeah.
We're on the same team, Nick. Yeah, but I'm just helping you.
Join us for Ministry of Offence, Saturday nights, 8 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I love the fact you're full of very bad jokes this morning, some of you. We've been talking about sleeping together and whether you sleep better together or apart. Philip is in a caravan in the Peak District. Morning
right
to
now?
you. Right now.
Oh, yeah.
He says, my wife and I bought a waterbed last year and since then we've drifted apart.
Oh, it's a good one. Thank you.
Nice one. Yeah, like it.
David in Kings Lynn, morning, David, says, I sleep with a face full of my missus's hair. And my cat has worked out, if she chews my phone charger, I get up and feed her.
They ain't daft. No. They ain't daft. Look, talking about sleeping together and cuddling up at night and all that sort of thing, should we talk about love?
Love Island is back on our screens. It's that time of year again. I have never watched 1 second of it, have you?
No.
No. Not my cup of tea. But it's already been criticised, apparently, for an age gap problem.
Yes, one Love Island contestant, 19-year-old Gemma Owen, says she fancies the newcomer David.
David is 27.
27, oh, shock horror. That sparked a storm on social media.
Yeah, now, Gemma is the daughter of the footballer Michael Owen.
Yeah.
And he's already said, because it was all in the news yesterday, that he really didn't want to watch it at all, because he doesn't want to watch his daughter snogging, basically, on television.
Or whatever else.
But apparently she's, well, yes, exactly, but she's 19 and this young man, David, is 27. That's quite an age gap. Is it anymore? I don't know. Let's talk to Dr. Pam Spur, who's a psychologist and social commentator. Hello, Pam.
Good morning.
Is a 19-year-old girl snogging on screen with a 27-year-old, and goodness knows what else, as Stephen said, is that an age gap that we should be tutting at, or is it not a problem anymore?
Oh, I don't think so. 8 years. I mean, if she was 16 and he was 24, that would be a very different kettle of fish. But the thing is, she's 19, nearly 20. In our 20s is when we really do a sort of major phase of reassessing our life and really maturing and growing. So she's nearly to that particular decade. That said, when you look at the relationship statistics, an 8-year age gap means you're 25% more likely to break up than a couple who only have 1 or 2 years between them. And the statistics really are sort of escalate. So if you take like a 20-year age gap, there's a 95% chance that a couple will fail. Pardon me, I've got the worst hay fever.
You're complaining of hay fever.
Look, does that statistic change depending on how old you are as a couple? I mean, is there a difference between a 20-year-old and a 40-year-old being together compared to a 40-year-old and a 60-year-old?
Absolutely. If you enter sort of the later years and you're looking at 40, 50, and 60-somethings, then you don't have the issues of, say, whether or not they want to have children. So that is a major issue for many age gap relationships. Often the older person already has children, the younger person might want children, so that becomes a major issue. But so in your later years, when you're not worried about children, often other factors come into play, like pressure from family and friends. I recently had a client who's 62 and she's dating an 82-year-old, and the families really objected to it. They think that their father should not be dating a 62-year-old. So those sorts of problems still occur no matter what the ages of the couple concerned. And they also can obviously, involve the younger couples too. So you have a 20-something going out with a 30-something. Again, you'll have a lot of family and friends pressuring you about why are you with this older or younger person.
Is there a difference between having an older man with a younger woman or an older woman with a younger man?
Really good question, because the thing is, what happens with older women when you look at the research into age gap relationships? Older women get a lot more pressure than older men. It's almost like, as a society, we think it's okay that older men have younger women on their arms. But with an older woman, it's often like, how dare she? What's she thinking? So it kind of escalates the pressure when you look at the sex of the older partner.
It's fascinating, isn't it, that we're still very old-fashioned in our views. Mind you, what's got us talking about this is Love Island, and I don't suppose any of those relationships are meant to be long-lasting, are they?
From my knowledge, and I'm not a Love Island watcher, most of them fall apart once the publicity ends. So couples who get onto Love Island, although there have been a couple successful ones, I know that from seeing the headlines, most of them fall apart after they've done their media appearances and bagged as much sort of revenue as they can from it. One point I did want to add that really causes problems between age gap couples also is popular references. So when you can't say, oh, remember in childhood when we used to watch this show, or my favorite band when I was a teenager, this, often that can become kind of a factor where people, like in my first marriage, my husband was 18 years older than me, my ex-husband. And he didn't get some of the, the popular references, the music I liked and all that kind of stuff. So it's really a wide range of challenges that age gap couples face, but they can make a success of it, like the Macrons or Michael and Catherine Douglas. There are couples who've been together a long time with a big age gap.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit grim to say, because love is love, I guess. And an age gap can be insignificant to some people, can't it?
Absolutely. If two people who are very compatible, it doesn't matter how many years you are apart. That's why some succeed. And people who do succeed often go in with their eyes wide open. They're ready to tell their friends and family that it's okay, that they're standing united, the couple, and they will unite against all the sort of pressure, the jokes from colleagues at work, the kind of ribbing like, oh, I know why you're with that older guy, he must have a lot of money, or, oh, I know why you're with that younger woman, she's really hot. So if a couple can unite and say, we're just going to be together, we're going to accept the fact there's going to be people who pressurize us, and we're going to discuss the things like whether or not we have children, how we relate if the older partner already has children, so if there's stepchildren involved. If they go into it talking about these things, they're much more likely to have success.
It depends on your interest, doesn't it? Great to talk to you about it, though, Pam. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. My parents were 13 years apart.
Were they?
Very long and happy marriage, yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. She never complained that he didn't like her music or the other way around. I think they had wartime experiences very much in common.
Yeah.
But just 13 years was quite a gap.
Yes, it is really. Whatever works for you. My uncle and his wife are 12 years apart, and he's older, and I've never known a couple as happy.
Age is just a number, and maybe age gap is now as well. It just depends on who you are and what you love about each other.
And probably the older you are when you get together probably helps, I think.
Unless one of you wants children and the other one just has been there, done that, feels too old.
Let us know what you think. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Let's just run you through a couple of headlines this morning. And Prince Charles has reportedly described the government's policy of sending some asylum seekers to Rwanda as appalling. He's quoted in The Times. Apparently he made the comments in private. Clarence House says he's politically neutral. About 31 migrants are due on the first flight on Tuesday. That was following a court case yesterday. However, the judge has granted permission to appeal against that move, so that could be heard as early as Monday.
Meanwhile, Brazilian police have found apparently human remains in the Amazon River, where a British journalist and Indigenous expert disappeared. Dom Phillips and travel companion Bruno Pereira were last seen on Sunday after visiting a remote part of the rainforest in São Rafael. Blood traces found on a boat of a fisherman who's been arrested as a suspect will now also be tested.
1 in 6 of us say we couldn't last a month financially if we lost our main source of income. The Building Societies Association say 1 in 4 think money worries affect their ability to do their job. And it says, of course, that people won't be able to save money at the moment because of the cost of living squeeze.
And the mother of a boy with severe epilepsy is urging manufacturers to help hard-pressed families access medical cannabis. Charlotte Caldwell says dozens have had to pay privately to get a private prescription at a time when the cost of living is soaring. And she said those aged 18 or over can access treatment, but younger children are being left behind.
Now, sport, showbiz. We've got it all for you this morning. Stephanie and Aidan are back. Morning,
Hi.
you two.
Hello.
Morning.
Morning.
I can just picture you two
Yeah.
getting together, doing a bit of a waltz or something.
Oh,
bit of a dance.
I haven't got a move in me.
Yeah.
Haven't you?
Not really.
And I thought you would be a good dancer.
No,
dancer.
It's sort of thing, if I had a few lessons, I reckon I had a girlfriend once years ago who
Yeah.
she complained that I didn't want lessons in dancing. She even phoned my mum to try and get to convince me. But I still didn't. I wasn't.
See, I can't dance, but I'd like to be able to. I think it'd be quite a nice thing to.
I can, but I've been invited on Strictly several times.
Have you?
Yeah. A long time ago. But isn't that interesting? Have you seen the front page of the
I did see that, yeah.
that Prince Charles and Camilla apparently have invited Strictly Come Dancing to do it from Buckingham Palace.
I think this is so exciting. Strictly's one of my favourite shows,
Is
guys.
it?
I love it, and I wish I could do ballroom dancing. It's probably something I should sign up for. But earlier this year, Camilla told someone on EastEnders, I think it was Rose Ayling-Ellis, that she was a big fan of EastEnders. So I'm not surprised that this has come out. And they want to do it in a way so it can mark the end of the Queen's Jubilee. And I think that would be incredible to host a show there.
From Buckingham Palace.
Yeah.
Well, the Sun may be pushing it a bit too hard, but they're saying that Charles and Camilla might do the opening dance.
Yeah, I think that would just be stuff dreams are made of to see both
Because
of
apparently
them.
Camilla is an enormous super fan of the show.
Yeah, she is.
Oh.
She loves it. She, apparently...
Did she not tell you that?
No, she didn't. No, I mentioned that.
Apparently she votes every week.
And there she is in red trousers. Oh, no, it's Judge Rinder.
Yeah, that could
Oh,
be it.
Lord.
He really loved it.
It's not. It's definitely not me.
No.
Doesn't it? The reprisal of the show doesn't
Yeah.
it show how sometimes old ideas can sometimes come around again and come back into fashion? Because
Yeah.
that was a show from like the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
wasn't it? And then they reprised it and repackaged it, and it's more popular than it ever was.
It was just called Come Dancing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think we're a nation that loves dancing in any shape
It's
or
good
form.
for you. I quite agree from that point of view. It's a very good thing to be interested in, isn't
And what I love about this show as well is, like, most of the celebrities on there have had no dancing experience or ballroom experience, and by the end of the show, they're just these fantastic professional dancers.
Well, not all of them.
Well, yeah.
Footballers are having dance lessons increasingly now.
Yeah.
They're in private, just to improve their balance.
I can imagine it's quite good for them.
Yeah, to way they move across the field, because the pitches are so. We discussed grass recently, didn't we?
Yeah.
But a couple of weeks ago. But the pitches are so true now that your footwork matters even more than it did previously, because you've got variables like rain and frost and things like that, and they're using it to improve their footwork. Yeah.
End of last year, I did go and have a cup of tea in the Tower Ballroom in Blackpool.
Ooh, that's the one.
That's the one.
That's the iconic
and
one.
I have to say, and there's just you can just go in and dance. Not that I did any dancing, but all these couples sort of around here, and then they all just get on the floor, and there's someone on the Wurlitzer and all that. Honestly, these couples.
Middle of the day.
Yeah, middle of the day.
Tea dances.
And these
Tea
couples, and a lot of them older couples, by heck, they could move.
Yeah.
They could move.
That's one thing my mum always complained about my dad about, because he didn't like dancing. She loved dancing.
Yeah.
But she said that during the war and in the years afterwards, it was such a brilliant way to meet people, to meet
I know of people who met
a love,
back then.
because you go to a dance hall to dance, and it is totally accepted that you'll dance with different people, and then sooner or later you'll hit it off with somebody. Apparently, she said
It's
it
like
was
speed
absolutely
dating.
brilliant way to. Well, sort of.
Dance dating.
Yeah, dance dating.
Yeah.
My mum had ballroom, modern tap, I think, but she did it as part of schooling as well. It was part of education in PE even. She took it out. She remember we were in Asda once about 30 years ago, and she bumped into a dance teacher near the frozen food section.
Mind you, being a sports person doesn't mean you're a good dancer, because isn't it Andy?
Is it Murray?
Murray's mum, Judy. Yeah. She was on Strictly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the best that anyone could say about it was that she waltzed around the floor like an ironing board.
Yeah, I don't think
Oh, really?
She wasn't as bad as them.
And yet you'd think somebody like that, so fit and so agile. She didn't turn out to be the greatest dancer.
Neither did Anne Widdicombe.
Coordination.
Anne Widdicombe.
Anne
John Sargent was another one, wasn't he?
Well, that's why I was happy when Bill Bailey won, because they always think like the older contestants aren't going to do well.
Oh, the joke
He was,
ones.
and he was
Novelty.
electrifying. I remember when Anne Widdicombe was on Strictly as well. So
But she was the novelty act, Anne Widdicombe.
Oh.
My niece copied Bill Bailey's dance on Christmas Day 2 years ago, and she got it off perfectly with the hat.
Really?
I'll have to bring in the video sometime. It's fantastic.
I think dancing is a real skill if you've got that sort of rhythm. And
Well, nowadays, when you get married, you're expected now to put on a show as the married couple. Did you not feel under that sort of pressure?
No, we didn't. We had a first dance, but it was a smooch.
Yeah.
Not
So you
a
didn't
performance.
learn every two.
No.
Practice beforehand.
That's what you have to do now. You actually
didn't practice your first dance?
No. It's just a smooch.
Dance, and I would be scared for my first dance.
Oh no, it was just a
lot of pressure now.
It was just a cuddle on the middle of the dance floor.
The song, what was your song?
What was your song?
Dancing cheek to cheek.
That's a classic. Ella Fitzgerald.
Errol Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Classic.
I can't believe we're talking about dancing.
No.
When again, I've hardly ever watched a little tiny snippet of Strictly.
So you said no, Anne.
So, well, I don't know whether I've been asked, particularly, or whether my agent's been sounded out, and it may not been, as much as being asked, but mostly because it takes up a good 3 months of your life, and it is incredibly exposing. I mean, every bit of you is just wrung out for the viewers, and I don't know whether I fancy that at all.
And there's a chance of falling in love with your dancer, your professional.
Apparently everybody does. You see, that's the magic of dancing again, isn't it? You get very up close and personal with somebody, you get to know them very well, and I imagine that there have been a lot of sort of romances that have lasted a couple of years.
James Jordan was in my class at school. I knew him from when I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, and we didn't know anything about his dancing prowess at all. It was something he picked up after our sort of sixth form period. But I remember playing him at tennis over at Chatham Grammar School for girls. We used to sneak over there and play tennis on the hard courts. And he couldn't hit the ball that well, but his movement was absolutely outstanding. My brother, who didn't even follow tennis that much, goes, "That bloke moves well. Who's he?" And he didn't hit. I beat him with a few forehands. Don't get me wrong. But then it was no surprise when 10 years later he'd been to Japan to actually train as a dancer properly, and that's where he met Ola. And he was on GBNews a few weeks ago.
They're a lovely couple.
Yeah, and then they came back to England, and suddenly the world was their oyster. They were invited onto Strictly, and it's gone on to pay for them a really, really lucrative and exciting lifestyle.
It's a huge animal, isn't it?
Yes.
Strictly now.
I did meet.
The fact that it's going to come out of the palace will really make it.
That would be
Has Anton de Beck left now? Is he off Strictly?
No, so he's now going to be one of the judges because it's actually Bruno Tonioli who's now leaving the show.
Right.
So that he confirmed that he's going to go to the US version where Len is.
And then they do live versions as well, don't they?
So Len Goodman's in America, is he?
Yeah, Len's in America.
He's always he was doing both, wasn't he?
Yeah, and I thought he was really good over here. I thought he was a good household name, but the States love a bit of us.
Do they go for the money as well?
Money at it. It's called Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars, and I think it's good to have a British judge on those kind of shows. And Bruno is actually going to be missed from the show because he's quite lively.
No,
so
I
think the US audience are really going to like him.
Yeah. We better talk a bit of sport, Aidan.
Yeah, England on duty tonight, 7:45 at Molineux, the first England international to take place at Molineux since 1956.
But without a crowd.
3,000 kids there, one adult for every 10 children. So it's a nice thing to do. It backfired last week with 30,000 of them getting into the Hungary match and causing all sorts of problems for the England team. So this evening it's against Italy. It's a rerun of the Euro 2020 final last summer. Gareth Southgate said it's not about revenge, but I think they could beat them 28-0 tonight, and it still wouldn't account for losing that game last summer. So, it's Gareth Southgate was quite forthright this week, saying it's an embarrassment for the nation that we're having this game at Molineux and then the locals can't see it. Having said that, they're playing Hungary at home on Tuesday in the Nations League at Molineux, so the locals will get to see a crowd, which is great.
What do you think the scoreline's going to be, Aidan?
Tonight, I think they're always tight between the last 4 matches being have ended in a draw. I could see it being a draw again tonight, 1-1.
Yeah, we do love a draw, don't we?
Would there be a penalty shootout then? Is that sort of game?
No, it's a Nations League, so in a league with each other, so it's points given out. So it's conceivable that Italy could come for the point, but hopefully we'll see a decent game. And as I say, 5 years ago, we'd have seen these matches would have been friendlies. They'd have been lethargic. They'd have been players with their minds on the beach. At least they're competitive. At least you're getting decent games against Hungary last Saturday. You got a decent game against Germany. And the players are still tired. Some of them are still coming off the back of 60 matches a season. And after Tuesday, they will get a rest as well. And it's much needed because anyone who understands the modern psyche of a footballer and the physiology and the sports science behind it understands that they need rest.
Right.
What about the cricket?
Cricket, a difficult day. They've won the first test, obviously, England, but they've gone up to Trent Bridge. New Zealand set them a target of 318 for 4. That's a hell of a chase today, underway at 11 o'clock this morning at Trent Bridge. Now, the issue is that Michael Vaughan said on Test Match Special yesterday that if England had been confident, and this is a team that's won 2 matches in the last 18, they would have bat first and set them a target, set New Zealand a target to chase. Instead, if you're feeling a bit cautious and you're not overly confident, you let the others bat and see what they can mount up and see if you can try and chase it. If you're confident, and you go in first, and it's kind of endemic or symptomatic of the problems England are having in recent months, even allowing for the changes they've made at the top. But they have won the first test.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, you should go and train the cricket.
Oh my gosh!
No, because you would teach them how to be confident.
I'm not. I hate cricket. I'm so sorry. I hate cricket and snooker. I just don't get neither of those sports.
I'll get my new pool table arriving on Thursday.
Oh,
do you?
I'm giving my old one to. I'm donating my old one to a youth club in Shepherd's Bush. Keeping up, put me in touch.
It's fun to play, but I agree with you. It's not such fun to watch.
No.
Although when they introduced snooker on television, it was the opening to BBC Two when they opened BBC Two.
Is that right?
Yeah.
They did.
It was the first thing they showed, and it had massive audiences and continued to deliver BBC.
Well, the 85 final between Dennis Taylor and Steve Davis, that was £22 million audience at 1 in the morning.
Wow.
They'll never see those numbers again. I mean, in the days of four channels, but you say that BBC Two opened up with snooker.
It was the opening up at BBC Two, and whose decision was it to put snooker on BBC Two? The head of BBC Two at the time.
Was it?
What year? Hang on, what year?
Was it
Marmaduke Hussey?
David Attenborough.
It was David Attenborough.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Attenborough?
Yeah, he was head of BBC Two at the time.
Really?
And he is the one who said we should open up with the snooker.
Channel 4 opened up with Brookside.
I tell you what,
Yes, they did.
I tell you what, I've got to stop you all there because we're out of time. Thank you both. We'll see you all tomorrow. Esther and Philip are here next. We're back 6 o'clock tomorrow.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's not going to feel like summer today across Scotland and Northern Ireland, windy with showers, and that wind will be touch and gale force around exposed western coasts of Scotland because of an area of low pressure, unseasonably deep for the time of year. That bringing tightly packed isobars across much of the north of the UK. A blustery day for many, but the strongest winds reaching the Western Isles, where gusts will be in excess of 50 miles.